The galaxy's weakest species faces extinction at the hands of merciless poachers, but humanity stands ready to intervene. In the crowded docking bay of New Singapore Spaceport, a battered Kobali transport limps into view, its hull scarred by weapons fire. Alexander Ward, a weathered human mercenary, watches as the ship's airlock hisses open, revealing a scene of chaos and desperation. A small, frail figure stumbles out, her bioluminescent skin flickering weakly. She collapses at Alexander's feet, her large, expressive eyes filled with terror. "Please," she gasps, her voice barely audible above the din of the spaceport. "Help us." Alexander kneels beside the injured Kobali, his hand instinctively moving to the blaster at his hip. He's seen his fair share of trouble in the galaxy, but something about this situation sets his nerves on edge. The Kobali, known for their peaceful nature and physical weakness, are rarely seen in such distress. "What's your name?" he asks, scanning the area for potential threats. "Karina," she responds, wincing in pain. "Our homeworld. Overrun. Poachers everywhere. We're being hunted for our organs." Alexander's jaw tightens. He's heard rumors of a powerful crime syndicate targeting vulnerable species, but this is the first concrete evidence he's encountered. As he helps Karina to her feet, he realizes the implications of this attack extend far beyond the Kobali. If left unchecked, this syndicate could destabilize the entire galactic community, potentially threatening humanity's standing. "We need to get you to the human embassy," Alexander decides, supporting Karina's weight as they move through the crowded spaceport. The other aliens give them a wide berth, some eyeing the Kobali with pity, others with predatory interest. They're halfway to the embassy when Alexander's instincts kick in. He spots a group of rough-looking aliens converging on their position, their eyes fixed on Karina. Without hesitation, he draws his blaster and pushes Karina behind a stack of cargo containers. The firefight erupts in a matter of seconds. Energy bolts sizzle through the air as Alexander engages the poachers. His military training takes over, each shot finding its mark with deadly precision. The aliens, clearly unprepared for such skilled resistance, fall back in disarray. But the victory is short-lived. A stray bolt catches Karina in the shoulder, and she crumples to the ground. Alexander scoops her up, his mind racing. The nearest medical facility is 2 levels up, and he can hear reinforcements approaching. As he sprints through the winding corridors of the spaceport, dodging panicked civilians and security droids, Alexander makes a decision. This isn't just about saving one Kobali anymore. This is an opportunity for humanity to prove itself on the galactic stage. He taps his comm unit, connecting to a frequency he hasn't used in years. "Firebird Squad, this is War Dog. We've got a situation. I'm calling in that favor." Moments later, as he bursts into the medical facility with Karina in his arms, Alexander's comm unit crackles to life. "War Dog, this is Firebird Actual. We're spinning up. What's the mission?" Alexander looks down at the injured Kobali, then at the chaotic scene unfolding in the spaceport below. "We're going to war," he replies grimly. "Time to show the galaxy what humanity can do." As the medical droids rush to treat Karina, Alexander turns his attention to the tactical display on his wrist computer. The poachers are regrouping, but they have no idea what's coming. Humanity is about to enter the fray, and the galaxy will never be the same. Alexander's comm unit crackled with static as he raced through the spaceport, Karina cradled in his arms. The injured Kobali's luminescent skin flickered weakly, her breathing shallow and labored. "War Dog, this is Firebird Actual. ETA to your location, 15 minutes. What's your status?" Alexander ducked into a maintenance corridor, avoiding the chaos erupting in the main concourse. "Negative, Firebird. Change of plans. Meet me at the human embassy. We've got a situation that requires diplomatic finesse." He glanced down at Karina, her large eyes filled with pain and fear. "Hang in there," he muttered, more to himself than to her. The embassy loomed ahead, its sleek architecture a stark contrast to the utilitarian design of the spaceport. Alexander burst through the doors, startling the staff inside. "I need medical assistance now," he barked, his voice echoing through the polished lobby. A young attaché approached, his eyes widening at the sight of the injured alien. "Sir, we can't dash." Alexander cut him off. "Get me your chief medical officer and the ambassador. Now." Moments later, Dr. Marcus Evans rushed into the lobby, followed closely by Ambassador Chen. The doctor's eyes narrowed as he assessed Karina's condition. "Bring her to the medbay," Evans ordered, leading the way through the embassy's winding corridors. As Alexander laid Karina on the examination table, he turned to Ambassador Chen. "Ma'am, we have an opportunity here. The Kobali are under attack, and we can be the ones to save them." Chen's expression remained neutral. "Mr. Ward, you know we can't involve ourselves in interspecies conflicts without proper authorization." Alexander's expression resolute. He gestured to Karina, who lay unconscious as Dr. Evans worked feverishly to stabilize her. "With all due respect, Ambassador, look at her. The Kobali are defenseless. If we don't step in, they'll be wiped out." Before Chen could respond, Dr. Evans let out a surprised gasp. "This is incredible," he muttered, staring at his medical scanner. "What is it?" Alexander and Chen asked in unison. Evans looked up, his eyes shining with excitement. "The Kobali's cellular structure. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. Their ability to resist disease is off the charts. This could revolutionize human medicine." Chen's demeanor shifted, a spark of interest igniting in her eyes. "Are you certain, Doctor?" Evans nodded emphatically. "Absolutely. With further study, we could potentially cure dozens of human ailments." Alexander seized the moment. "Ambassador, this is bigger than just saving a species. This is about securing humanity's future. If we protect the Kobali, we not only prove ourselves on the galactic stage, but potentially save countless human lives in the process." Chun was silent for a long moment, her gaze shifting between Alexander, Karina, and Dr. Evans. Finally, she nodded. "Very well, Mr. Ward. You have the embassy's support. What do you need?" Alexander's shoulders relaxed slightly. "First, we need to contact Earth. I have some old friends who can help." Within minutes, Alexander found himself in the embassy's secure communications room, face to face with the weathered visage of Colonel James Hawthorne. "Ward," Hawthorne grunted, "I hope this is important. You're interrupting my retirement." Alexander quickly outlined the situation, watching as Hawthorne's expression shifted from annoyance to keen interest. A chance to one-up the Zarn and score points with the Galactic Council? Hawthorne mused. Not to mention the medical breakthroughs. "All right, Ward. You've got my attention. I'll assemble a team and be there in 48 hours. As Alexander emerged from the comm room, he found Dr. Evans waiting for him. "She's awake," Evans said, "and she's asking for you." Alexander entered the medbay to find Karina sitting up, her luminescence brighter but still unsteady, her large eyes fixed on him as he approached. "Alexander," she said, her voice stronger than before, "thank you for saving me. But my people, they're still in danger." He sat beside her, his voice low and reassuring. "We're going to help them, Karina. I promise. But I need you to tell me everything you know about what's happening to your people." As Karina began to speak, detailing the brutal attacks on her homeworld and the hidden refugee camp on Eridani IV, Alexander felt a familiar tension building in his muscles. The calm before the storm. Outside the embassy, the spaceport of New Singapore buzzed with activity. Alien traders and diplomats from a dozen worlds argued and negotiated, unaware of the galactic shift about to occur. In orbit, the sleek warships of the Zarn Empire moved into position, their commanders watching the human embassy with growing suspicion. And on a distant, shadowy world, Krogath the Merciless received word of the injured Kobali who had escaped his grasp. The Draxian warlord's eyes narrowed as he considered this new human interference in his plans. The stage was set. In 48 hours, humanity would take its first steps towards becoming a major player in galactic politics. Alexander checked his blaster, his mind already planning their next move. The real challenge was just beginning. Alexander's comm unit crackled to life, interrupting his strategic planning session with Ambassador Chen. War Dog, this is Firebird Actual. We're in position and awaiting your orders. He exchanged a quick glance with Chun, who nodded her approval. Copy that, Firebird. Prepare for immediate deployment. Sending coordinates now. As Alexander transmitted the data, Dr. Evans burst into the room, his eyes wide with excitement. Mr. Ward, Ambassador, you need to see this. Karina's recovery rate is unprecedented. Her cellular regeneration is off the charts. Chun raised an eyebrow. How does this affect our mission, Doctor? Evans took a deep breath, composing himself. It means the Kobali are even more valuable than we initially thought. Their biology could be the key to unlocking human potential we've only dreamed of. Alexander's mind focused. This new information only reinforced the urgency of their mission. Then we don't have a moment to lose. Ambassador, I need full clearance for the Shadowhawk. Chen nodded, her fingers dancing across her datapad. Done. You have carte blanche, Mr. Ward. Bring our new allies home safe. Within hours, Alexander found himself strapped into the pilot's seat of the HSS Shadowhawk, the sleek vessel humming with barely suppressed power. Beside him, Sergeant Sarah Cooper ran through pre-flight checks, her movements crisp and efficient. All systems green, sir, Cooper reported, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. Alexander nodded, his hands hovering over the controls. Initiating stealth systems. Let's show these poachers what humanity can do. The Shadowhawk slipped out of New Singapore's docking bay, its advanced cloaking technology rendering it invisible to both visual and electronic detection. As they accelerated towards the hyperspace jump point, Alexander briefed his team on the mission parameters. Intel suggests the Crimson Syndicate has discovered the Kobali refugee camp on Eridani 4, he explained, his voice grim. Our primary objective is to extract the survivors and neutralize the threat. Lieutenant Evans, you'll be responsible for coordinating with Karina and managing the evacuation. Evans nodded, his medical kit already prepared for the worst-case scenario. Understood. Sir, we'll get them out safely. The journey through hyperspace was tense, each member of the team lost in their own thoughts. Alexander found himself reflecting on the gravity of their mission. This wasn't just about saving the Kobali anymore. It was humanity's chance to prove itself on the galactic stage. As they emerged from hyperspace near Eridani 4, the ship's sensors immediately picked up multiple Crimson Syndicate vessels in orbit. Alexander's hands tightened on the controls, guiding the Shadowhawk through the debris field that surrounded the moon. Stealth systems holding, Cooper reported, her eyes fixed on the sensor readouts. They haven't detected us. Alexander nodded, carefully maneuvering the ship through the moon's turbulent atmosphere. The Shadowhawk's advanced technology allowed them to slip past the Syndicate's defenses unnoticed, descending into a narrow canyon near the refugee camp's coordinates. As the team disembarked, the harsh reality of their situation became apparent. The air was thin and acrid, filled with the distant sounds of weapons fire and screams. Alexander led the way, his blaster at the ready, with Karina close behind, her bioluminescent skin providing a soft glow in the dim light. They crested a ridge, and the full horror of the scene unfolded before them. Crimson Syndicate forces swarmed through the Kobali settlement, roughly herding civilians into transport ships. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of burning structures. Alexander quickly assessed the situation, his military training kicking into high gear. Cooper, you're with me. We'll engage the Syndicate forces directly. Evans, take Karina and lead the remaining Kobali to safety through those underground tunnels she mentioned. As the team split up, Alexander and Cooper launched their assault on the unsuspecting Syndicate forces. The element of surprise, combined with their superior weaponry and training, allowed them to cut through the Poachers' ranks with ruthless efficiency. Alexander moved like a force of nature, his blaster firing with pinpoint accuracy. Each shot found its mark, downing Syndicate thugs before they could even register the threat. Cooper matched his intensity, her combat skills honed to perfection through years of special operations training. Meanwhile, Evans and Karina navigated the chaotic battlefield, guiding terrified Kobali refugees towards a hidden tunnel network. Evans's medical expertise proved invaluable as he treated injuries on the move, stabilizing the wounded and ensuring no one was left behind. As the battle intensified, Alexander realized they were facing overwhelming odds. The Syndicate forces, though caught off guard, were regrouping quickly. He tapped his comm unit, his voice urgent. Firebird Actual, this is War Dog. We need immediate backup at my coordinates. The situation is foobar. Colonel Hawthorne's gruff voice came through, tinged with concern. Copy that, War Dog. Diverting all available assets to your location. Hold the line. Alexander gritted his teeth, ducking behind a fallen pillar as energy bolts sizzled overhead. Cooper, fall back to that ridge. We need to bottleneck them until reinforcements arrive. As they retreated to higher ground, the sound of approaching engines filled the air. Alexander looked up, expecting to see Syndicate reinforcements. Instead, his face broke into a grim smile as he recognized the distinctive silhouette of human dropships. The battlefield erupted in chaos as precision fire rained down on the Syndicate positions. Combat teams rappelled from the ships, their advanced armor gleaming in the harsh light of Eridani IV's sun. The tide of battle shifted dramatically, with the human forces pushing back the Poachers. In the midst of the fray, Alexander spotted a hulking Draxian barking orders to the retreating Syndicate forces. His eyes narrowed as he recognized the field commander, Vexthor, from intelligence briefings. Cooper, cover me, Alexander ordered, holstering his blaster. I'm taking him alive. He charged across the battlefield, dodging energy bolts and leaping over debris. Vexthor turned, his eyes widening in surprise as Alexander closed the distance. The two collided in a brutal display of hand-to-hand combat, with Alexander's human agility giving him a slight edge over the Draxian's raw strength. The fight was fierce and evenly matched, but Alexander's willpower won out. With a final, decisive strike, he brought Vexthor to his knees, securing the Draxian's hands behind his back. As the last of the Syndicate forces retreated, Alexander surveyed the battlefield. The human victory was clear, but the cost had been high. Injured Kobali and humans alike were being treated by medical teams, while others worked to secure the area and begin the massive evacuation effort. Lieutenant Evans approached, his uniform stained with alien blood and dirt. Sir, we've secured the remaining refugees. The Shadowhawk and other human ships are ready for transport. Alexander nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the Syndicate ships were disappearing into the atmosphere. Good work, Lieutenant. Get them loaded up and ready for departure. Our fight here is done, but the war against the Crimson Syndicate is not nearly finished. As the evacuation proceeded, Alexander turned his attention to his Draxian prisoner. Vexthor glared at him with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. You humans are more formidable than we anticipated, the Draxian growled. Alexander's expression remained impassive. You have no idea. Now, let's have a chat about your operations, shall we? As the last of the Kobali refugees were loaded onto the waiting ships, Alexander couldn't shake the feeling that this victory, while significant, was just the beginning of a much larger conflict. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was now at the center of that change. Whatever came next, they would be ready. Alexander turned away from the retreating Syndicate ships, his mind already racing with the implications of their victory. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but he knew this was just the beginning of a much larger conflict. "Ward, we need to move," Cooper called out, her voice urgent. The Shadowhawks prepped and ready for takeoff. He nodded, gesturing to the nearby soldiers to escort Vextor onto the ship. The Draxian prisoner snarled but offered no resistance as he was led away. As they boarded the Shadowhawk, Alexander took one last look at the battlefield. The once-hidden Kobali settlement was now a smoking ruin, but the survivors were safely aboard human vessels. It was a bittersweet victory. The journey back to New Singapore was tense, with Alexander splitting his time between interrogating Vextor and coordinating with Ambassador Chun to prepare for their arrival. As they approached the spaceport, Alexander's comm unit crackled to life. "Shadowhawk, this is New Singapore Control. Be advised, we're experiencing heavy congestion due to the influx of refugees. Proceed to Docking Bay 17 for priority clearance." Alexander acknowledged the message, guiding the ship through the crowded orbital lanes. As they descended, he could see the impact of their mission on the cityscape below. Temporary structures had sprung up on the outskirts of the spaceport, a hastily assembled refugee camp to house the Kobali. Upon landing, Alexander and his team were immediately swept into a whirlwind of activity. Dr. Evans rushed off with a group of Kobali patients, eager to continue his research. Cooper took charge of transferring Vextor to a secure holding facility, while Alexander found himself face-to-face with a harried-looking Ambassador Chin. "Mr. Ward, the situation is spiraling," Chin said, her usually composed demeanor showing signs of stress. "The Kobali refugees have overwhelmed our facilities, and we're facing pushback from some of the local colonists. They're afraid we're painting a target on New Singapore." Alexander frowned, taking in the chaos around them. "We need to get ahead of this, Ambassador. Set up a town hall meeting. I'll address their concerns directly." As they walked through the spaceport, Alexander could feel the tension in the air. Human colonists eyed the Kobali with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, while the refugees huddled together, their bioluminescent skin pulsing with anxiety. "Alexander!" a familiar voice called out. He turned to see Karina approaching, her glow noticeably brighter than before. "Thank you for saving my people. But what happens now?" Before he could respond, Dr. Evans appeared, his eyes alight with excitement. "Mr. Ward, Ambassador, you won't believe what I've discovered. The Kobali's bioluminescent organs contain compounds that could revolutionize human medicine. We're talking potential cures for diseases that have plagued our colonies for years." Chen's eyes widened at the implications. "This changes everything. We need to inform the Council immediately." As they discussed the ramifications of Evans' discovery, Alexander's comm unit beeped. It was Colonel Hawthorne. "Ward, get to the command center ASAP. We've got actionable intel from your Draxian friend, and we're planning something big." Alexander excused himself and made his way to the embassy's secure command center. Inside, he found Hawthorne poring over holographic star charts, his face grim with dedication. "We've located the Crimson Syndicate's main base of operations," Hawthorne announced without preamble. "Thanks to Vextor's intel, we have a chance to strike at the heart of their organization. I'm assembling a task force, and I want you and your team on it." As Hawthorne outlined the plan, Alexander felt a mix of anticipation and concern. The offensive would be the largest operation humans had undertaken in galactic space, with potentially far-reaching consequences. "There's more," Hawthorne continued, his voice lowering. "We detected increased activity from the Zarn Empire. They're moving ships into position near our space, claiming it's for peacekeeping. Intelligence suggests they're not too happy about our growing influence. Alexander's mind raced with the implications. They see us as a threat now. Hawthorne nodded, which means we'll have to divert some resources to shore up our defenses. It complicates the offensive against the Syndicate, but we don't have a choice. As they continued planning, a commotion outside caught their attention. Alexander stepped out to find a group of human colonists arguing with Kobali refugees, their voices raised in anger. "You're going to bring war to our doorstep," one colonist shouted. "We were safe before you came here." Alexander moved quickly to intervene, placing himself between the two groups. "That's enough. We're all in this together now. The Kobali are under our protection, and we will not abandon them." His words seemed to calm the situation momentarily, but Alexander could see that tensions were far from dedication. He turned to a nearby security officer. "Increase patrols in the refugee areas. I want any signs of trouble reported immediately." As he headed back to the command center, Alexander's comm unit chimed again. It was Ambassador Chun. "Mr. Ward, we've just received word. The Galactic Council is sending a delegation to assess the situation here on New Singapore. They'll be arriving within the week." Alexander took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the coming challenges. The rescue of the Kobali had been just the beginning. Now, they faced a complex web of military operations, diplomatic negotiations, and internal conflicts. As he rejoined Hawthorne to continue planning the offensive against the Crimson Syndicate, Alexander couldn't shake the feeling that every decision they made now would shape the future of humanity's place in the galaxy. The real test of their grit and capabilities was yet to come. Alexander's mind raced as he prepared for the impending assault on the Crimson Syndicate's main base. The weight of the mission pressed heavily on his shoulders as he boarded the lead ship of the human-led task force. Colonel Hawthorne's voice crackled over the comm system. "All ships, prepare for stealth approach. We're entering the Theta Nebula." The fleet of advanced human warships and allied alien vessels glided silently through the treacherous gravitational anomalies and dense asteroid fields of the nebula. Alexander stood on the bridge, watching as the swirling gases and debris parted before them, revealing glimpses of the remote planetoid that housed the Syndicate stronghold. Suddenly, alarms blared across the ship. A junior officer called out, "Sir, long-range scanners detecting multiple signatures on the system's outskirts." Colonel Hawthorne's face tightened as he studied the holographic display. "Zarn Empire Battle Group. They must have followed us." He turned to Alexander, his voice grim. "Ward, we need to split our forces. Take the main assault group and continue to the planetoid. I'll lead a defensive perimeter against the Zarn." Alexander nodded, his eyebrows furrowed. As Hawthorne's ships peeled away to form a protective screen, Alexander led the remaining vessels towards their target. The planetoid's harsh, rocky surface came into view, its craggy landscape dotted with the telltale signs of Syndicate occupation. "Prepare for ground assault," Alexander ordered. Striding towards the hangar bay, he met Sergeant Sarah Cooper and Lieutenant Michael Evans by the stealth dropships, their faces a mixture of anticipation and focus. As they descended through the planetoid's thin atmosphere, Alexander briefed his team. "What's the damage, Lieutenant?" Evans swallowed hard. "Sir, it appears crucial mission data has been stolen. Our attack plans, troop movements, everything." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Their element of surprise was gone. Hawthorne's eyes narrowed. "This has to be the work of our mole. Ward Cooper, my office. Now." As they hurried after the colonel, Alexander's mind raced. They had mere hours before the planned assault, and now their entire strategy was compromised. In Hawthorne's office, the colonel didn't waste time. "We need to completely overhaul our approach. Ward, What do you suggest? Alexander took a deep breath, formulating a plan on the spot. We divide our strike force into smaller, more flexible units. Each targets a different Syndicate facility. It'll make our movements harder to predict. Hawthorne nodded. Make it happen. Cooper, work on adapting our tactics to this new plan. I want all unit leaders briefed before dawn. As they left the office, Sergeant Cooper turned to Alexander. I'll get started on the tactical revisions. We'll make this work, sir. Alexander nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He headed back to the command center, ready to implement the new strategy. Hours passed in a blur of planning and preparation. As dawn approached, Alexander stood before a holographic display of their primary target, a massive organ processing plant on a remote moon. He was about to brief the strike team leaders when a commotion erupted near the hangar entrance. Dr. Marcus Evans burst into the room, his lab coat askew. Commander Ward, I've made a breakthrough with the Kobali enzyme. Alexander turned, surprised by the interruption. Doctor, we're in the middle of... You need to hear this, Evans insisted. Prolonged exposure to the synthesized enzyme is causing unexpected side effects in human test subjects. Enhanced physical abilities, accelerated healing. It's like something out of a science fiction novel. Before Alexander could respond, another alarm blared. Lieutenant Evans' voice came over the intercom, tension evident in his tone. Sir, we have a situation in the refugee sector. A large group of Kobali are attempting to commandeer several of our ships. Alexander cursed under his breath. He turned to Cooper. Take a security team and contain that situation. We can't afford to lose any ships, and we need to prevent civilian casualties. As Cooper hurried off, Alexander refocused on the mission at hand. Despite the setbacks, they had to press forward with the attack. Hours later, Alexander found himself leading the main strike force as they infiltrated the Syndicate facility. The new adaptive armor allowed them to blend seamlessly with the shadows, their movements silent and precise. As they breached the outer defenses, Alexander couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The Syndicate forces seemed unusually well prepared, their counterattacks too precise. They knew we were coming, he muttered, ducking behind cover as energy blasts sizzled past. Lieutenant Evans, do you copy? I read you, Commander, came the response over the comm. Run a deep scan of the facility. Something's not right here. Moments later, Evans' voice crackled through again, urgency evident in his tone. Sir, I'm detecting unusual energy signatures throughout the complex. It appears to be some kind of fail-safe mechanism. If the facility falls, it could trigger a chain reaction that would destroy the entire moon. Alexander's mind raced. They needed to secure the facility and disarm the fail-safe, all while battling increasingly desperate Syndicate forces. As his team pushed deeper into the complex, the resistance grew fiercer. Alexander noticed something strange about some of the enemy troops. They moved with inhuman speed and seemed to shrug off injuries that should have been debilitating. A cold realization dawned on him. The Syndicate had been conducting their own experiments with the Kobali enzyme. Laser fire erupted from a side corridor, forcing Alexander and his team to take cover. As he peered around the corner, he saw a group of genetically modified Syndicate troops advancing, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. All units be advised, Alexander called into his comm. We're facing enhanced enemy combatants. Extreme caution is advised. As the battle raged on, Alexander led his team towards the heart of the facility, where they hoped to find the controls for the fail-safe mechanism. Time was running out, and the fate of the mission and possibly the entire moon hung in the balance. Suddenly, Alexander's comms crackled to life. It was Colonel Hawthorne, his voice tense. Ward, we've got Syndicate reinforcements incoming. Our fleet is engaging them in orbit, but we can't hold them off indefinitely. Whatever you're going to do down there, do it fast." Alexander gritted his teeth, pushing forward with rekindled purpose. As they fought their way through the final defenses, he couldn't help but wonder what other surprises the Crimson Syndicate had in store for them, and what shocking revelations might be waiting in the facility's secure data vaults. With the clock ticking and the odds stacked against them, Alexander and his team prepared to make their final push into the heart of the Syndicate's operations. The true test of Operation Lighthouse was about to begin. The true test of Operation Lighthouse was about to unfold in ways none of them had anticipated. As Alexander and his team pushed deeper into the facility, the resistance they encountered grew increasingly fierce. Energy blasts sizzled through the air, forcing them to take cover behind twisted metal barriers. "Commander, we've got a problem," shouted Sergeant Cooper over the comm. "These aren't ordinary Syndicate troops. They're moving too fast, healing too quickly." Alexander peered around his cover, his eyes widening as he saw a Syndicate soldier shrug off a direct hit to the chest. The wound closed almost instantly, leaving only a faint scar. "They've been experimenting with the Kobali enzyme," Alexander realized aloud. "All units, switch to high-powered stun settings. We need to overwhelm their enhanced healing abilities." The team adjusted their weapons, unleashing a barrage of concentrated energy blasts. The enhanced Syndicate troops faltered under the increased firepower, but it was clear that this battle would push them to their limits. As they fought their way through winding corridors, Lieutenant Evans' voice crackled over the comm. "Commander, I've identified the fail-safe mechanism. It's not a single control point. It's spread across multiple sectors of the base. We need to shut them down simultaneously to prevent the chain reaction." Alexander's mind raced, quickly formulating a new plan. "Cooper, take a team and secure the eastern sector. Martinez, you're on the west. I'll handle the central hub. We move fast. We move together." As the strike team split up, they encountered a sight that made their blood run cold. Rows of holding cells lined the corridors, each containing Kobali prisoners in various states of distress. Some were barely conscious, their bioluminescent patterns flickering weakly. "These monsters," Cooper growled, her voice thick with anger. "We can't leave them here." Alexander nodded grimly. "Agreed. Evans, we need an evac plan for the prisoners. Divert any available personnel to assist." As they worked to free the captives, the battle in orbit intensified. Colonel Hawthorne's voice came through, tense and urgent. "Ward, we've got a new problem up here. Unidentified ships just entered the system. They're bearing Zarn Empire markings, but something's off. No response to hails, and their attack patterns are all wrong." Alexander frowned, ducking as a blast of energy scorched the wall above him. "Understood. Sir could be a false flag operation. We'll deal with it once we secure the facility." The strike teams fought their way to their designated control points, facing waves of enhanced Syndicate troops. The battle was grueling, each victory hard-won against opponents who seemed to defy the limits of human endurance. In the central hub, Alexander and his core team finally broke through the last line of defense. They burst into a vast chamber filled with holographic displays and pulsing energy conduits. At its center stood a tall, live figure, clearly not human, with iridescent skin and eyes that glowed with an unnatural light. "Commander Ward," the alien said, her voice carrying a metallic undertone. "I am Vexlora, overseer of this facility. I must admit, I'm impressed you made it this far." Alexander raised his weapon, keeping it trained on Vexlora. "It's over. Shut down the fail-safe mechanism now." Vexlora's lips curled into a cold smile. "Over? Oh, I think not. This facility is but one node in a vast network. The Crimson Syndicate's reach extends further than you can imagine." She gestured to a nearby console. "I'll make you an offer, Commander. I can give you access to our entire database, every dirty secret, every illicit deal. In exchange, you let me walk away." Alexander's finger tightened on the trigger, his mind racing. Before he could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Evan's panicked voice came through the comm. "Commander, the fail-safe sequence has entered its final stage. I've managed to slow it down, but I can't stop it completely." Vexlora's smile widened. "Time's running out, Commander. What will it be?" Alexander's gaze darted between Vexlora and the console. The information she offered could be crucial, potentially exposing a galaxy-wide conspiracy. But with the facility on the brink of destruction, there was no time to verify her claims or secure the data. "Evans, initiate emergency evacuation protocol," Alexander ordered, his voice tight. "All teams, fall back to extraction points immediately. Prioritize getting the rescued prisoners out." He turned back to Vexlora, his expression hard. "Your offer's declined. You're coming with us to face justice for what you've done here." As Alexander moved to apprehend her, Vexlora's form shimmered and distorted. A hologram, her laughter echoed through the chamber as her image faded away. "Damn it!" Alexander cursed, banging his head against the console. "All units be advised. Vexlora is on the loose. Apprehend if possible, but evacuation is our top priority." The facility shuddered around them as the fail-safe mechanism continued its countdown. Alexander and his team fought their way back through the complex, assisting with the evacuation of the rescued Kobali prisoners. The enhanced Syndicate troops pressed their attack, seemingly heedless of their own safety, as the base began to crumble. As they neared the extraction point, Alexander received a transmission from Sergeant Cooper. "Sir, we've secured the data centers. Downloading crucial intel on Syndicate operations now. It's big. Weapons development, corrupt officials, the works." "Copy that, Cooper. Get that data and get out. We're almost dash." Alexander's response was cut short as an explosion rocked the corridor. The ceiling collapsed, debris raining down on them. As the dust settled, Alexander found himself separated from half of his team, a wall of rubble blocking the way. "Commander!" came the muffled shouts from the other side. "I'm all right," Alexander called back, coughing as he struggled to his feet. "There's no time to clear this. Get to the extraction point. I'll find another way out." As the shouts of protest faded, Alexander turned to face the darkened corridor behind him. The facility's emergency lights flickered, casting eerie shadows. Somewhere in the depths of the crumbling base, Vexlora was still at large, possibly with crucial information about the Syndicate's operations. Alexander checked his weapon and started down the corridor. The clock was ticking, the facility was falling apart around him, and the fate of the mission hung in the balance. But he couldn't shake the feeling that the key to unraveling the Syndicate's web of corruption lay somewhere in these halls. With dogged tenacity, Alexander pressed on into the shadows, knowing that every step could bring him closer to answers or to disaster. Disaster. With every step, the facility shuddered around him, chunks of debris raining down from the crumbling ceiling. Alexander's calm crackled to life. "Commander," it was Lieutenant Evans, his voice strained with urgency. "The fail-safe sequence has accelerated beyond my control. We need to evacuate now." "Copy that," Alexander replied, his heart made. He switched to the team-wide channel. "All units, this is Commander Ward. Initiate immediate evacuation. I repeat, immediate evacuation. Prioritize the rescued prisoners." As acknowledgments flooded in, Alexander changed course, heading towards the nearest extraction point. The corridors were a maze of twisted metal and flickering emergency lights. He rounded a corner and nearly collided with a group of his soldiers, half carrying wounded Kobali prisoners. "This way!" Alexander shouted. "Taking point." He led them through the chaos, his weapon at the ready. They encountered pockets of resistance, desperate Syndicate troops and enhanced super soldiers fighting to the bitter end. Alexander coordinated their defense, utilizing cover and suppressing fire to clear a path for the evacuees. "Ward," Colonel Hawthorne's voice cut through the din. "Shuttles are prepped and waiting. Get your people out of there." As they neared the extraction point, a familiar figure caught Alexander's eye. Vex Laura, the Syndicate base commander, was sprinting down an adjacent corridor, a sleek data core clutched to her chest. "Cooper," Alexander called to his sergeant, "get these people to the shuttles. I'm going after Vex Laura." Without waiting for a response, Alexander took off in pursuit. The chase led him through a labyrinth of collapsing passages, each step treacherous as the floor buckled beneath his feet. He caught up to Vex Laura in a vast hangar, now littered with debris and abandoned vehicles. She whirled to face him, her alien features contorted with fury. "It's over, Vex Laura," Alexander said, his weapon trained on her. Hand over the data core. She snarled, her form shimmering as she activated some kind of personal shield. "You ruined everything human." Vex Laura lunged at him, moving with inhuman speed. Alexander barely managed to dodge, feeling the air displace as she passed. He fired, but the energy bolts dissipated harmlessly against her shield. The two opponents circled each other, trading blows and near misses. Alexander's combat training served him well, but Vex Laura's enhanced physiology gave her a distinct advantage. A particularly violent tremor shook the hangar. Vex Laura stumbled, her shield flickering. Alexander seized the opportunity, tackling her to the ground. They grappled fiercely, rolling across the debris-strewn floor. With a burst of strength, Alexander pinned Vex Laura down, wrenching the data core from her grasp. He struck her temple with the butt of his weapon, and she went limp. Breathing heavily, Alexander secured the data core and hauled Vex Laura's unconscious form over his shoulder. He staggered towards the exit, the facility now coming apart around him. "Evans!" he shouted into his comm. "Status on the evacuation?" "Almost complete, sir," came the reply. "You're the last one. Hurry!" Alexander pushed himself to the limit, racing through corridors that were more falling apart than intact. He burst out onto the landing pad just as the final shuttle was powering up. "Go! Go! Go!" he yelled, leaping aboard with his captive. The shuttle's engines roared to life, lifting off as the ground beneath them began to give way. Through the viewport, Alexander watched as the Syndicate facility erupted in a massive explosion, the fireball engulfing everything for miles around. "All shuttles accounted for," reported the pilot, heading for the rendezvous point with the fleet. As they ascended into orbit, Alexander saw the battle raging above them. Colonel Hawthorne's ships were locked in combat with Syndicate reinforcements and the mysterious vessels bearing Zarn Empire markings. "Hawthorne to all ships," came the colonel's voice over the comm. "Adjust formation to cover the evacuation shuttles. Prepare for immediate withdrawal." The human fleet moved with practiced precision, creating a protective screen around the vulnerable shuttles. Energy weapons crisscrossed the void, lighting up the darkness of space. Just as they were about to make the jump to hyperspace, new contacts appeared on the sensors. "Sir," called out one of Hawthorne's officers, "we're detecting a group of ships entering the system. They're Vraxian, Sir Vraxian Consortium." Alexander felt his heart sink. The Vraxians were a powerful trading alliance with suspected ties to the Crimson Syndicate. This complicated matters significantly. A transmission cut through their comms. "Human vessels, this is Captain Drax of the Vraxian Consortium. You are in violation of multiple interstellar treaties. Stand down and prepare to surrender any Syndicate personnel and data in your possession." Colonel Hawthorne's response was immediate and firm. "Negative, Captain Drax. We are conducting a sanctioned operation against known criminals. Your intervention is neither required nor welcome." The tension was palpable as the two fleets faced off, weapons primed and shields at maximum. Suddenly, another transmission broke through. "Colonel Hawthorne, this is Ambassador Blackwell on New Singapore. I've just presented our evidence to key members of the Galactic Council. We have temporary political protection for our operation. Proceed with withdrawal." A collective sigh of relief swept through the human fleet. Hawthorne wasted no time. "All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump. Get us out of here." As the stars stretched into lines around them, Alexander allowed himself a moment to breathe. They had dealt a significant blow to the Syndicate, rescued countless prisoners, and secured vital intelligence. But he knew this was just the beginning. The journey back to New Singapore would take time they would use to analyze the treasure trove of data they had acquired. As Alexander began to sift through the information on the recovered data core, he realized the true scope of what they had uncovered. The Crimson Syndicate's tentacles reached further than anyone had imagined, implicating officials from various alien governments. This conspiracy went beyond simple criminality. It threatened the very fabric of galactic society. As the fleet hurtled through hyperspace, Alexander prepared himself for the challenges that lay ahead. The Syndicate had been wounded, but not defeated. And now, they had made powerful enemies who would stop at nothing to bury the truth. The real war, he realized, was just beginning. The real war, he realized, was just unfolding before them. As the fleet emerged from hyperspace near New Singapore, Alexander's comm unit chimed with an urgent message from Colonel Hawthorne. "Commander Ward, report to the briefing room immediately. We have a situation." Alexander made his way through the corridors of the flagship, his mind racing with the implications of their recent operation. When he entered the briefing room, he found Hawthorne and Ambassador Blackwell engaged in a heated discussion. "Gentlemen," Alexander said, announcing his presence. "What's the situation?" Hawthorne turned to him, his face grim. "We've got a powder keg waiting for us on New Singapore. The influx of Kobali refugees is causing significant strain on the colony's resources." Blackwell nodded, adding, "There are reports of growing tensions between human colonists and the Kobali. We need to address this immediately before it escalates." Alexander listened intently as they outlined the complex challenges facing New Singapore. The colony's infrastructure, originally designed for a much smaller population, was struggling to accommodate the sudden influx of Kobali refugees. Food shortages, overcrowding, and cultural misunderstandings were fueling resentment on both sides. "We need a comprehensive integration program," Alexander said, his mind already formulating strategies. "Something that fosters cooperation between humans and Kobali. It's not just about resources. It's about building trust and understanding." Over the next few hours, Alexander worked with his team to develop a series of initiatives. They planned cultural exchange programs, joint work projects to improve the colony's infrastructure, and mix human Kobali teams for various community services. As they approached New Singapore, Alexander received an update from Dr. Marcus Evans. The medical team was facing unprecedented challenges in treating the rescued Kobali prisoners. Many exhibited unstable genetic modifications, a grim reminder of the Syndicate's cruel experiments. "We're dealing with things we've never seen before," Evans explained, his holographic image flickering slightly. "But we're making progress. I think we're on the verge of a breakthrough in understanding Kobali physiology." Alexander encouraged Evans to continue his work, knowing that advances in Kobali medical care could go a long way in improving relations on the colony. As the fleet began docking procedures, Alexander turned his attention to the captured Syndicate data. The information they had acquired was staggering in its scope and implications. It revealed a vast network of corruption that extended far beyond their initial expectations, implicating high-ranking officials from various alien governments. including members of the Galactic Council itself. "This is bigger than we ever imagined," Alexander muttered, scrolling through the files. Ambassador Blackwell, reviewing the data alongside him, nodded gravely. "This information is both our greatest asset and our greatest danger. We'll need to be extremely careful how we use it." As they disembarked, Alexander was immediately confronted with the realities of the situation on New Singapore. The spaceport was crowded with a mix of human colonists and Kobali refugees, the atmosphere tense with unspoken hostility. Alexander wasted no time implementing the integration programs they had planned. He personally oversaw the establishment of mixed human Kobali work teams, starting with projects to expand the colony's housing and food production capabilities. Days turned into weeks as Alexander and his team worked tirelessly to manage the complex situation on New Singapore. The integration programs showed promise, with small but meaningful interactions between humans and Kobali occurring more frequently. However, new challenges arose. Alexander received word that Ambassador Blackwell had narrowly escaped an assassination attempt during a meeting with representatives from various alien species. The incident highlighted the dangerous game they were playing with the Syndicate data. "We need to increase security," Alexander told Colonel Hawthorne. "Not just for Blackwell, but for all key personnel involved in Operation Lighthouse." As they discussed security measures, an alert came through from the long-range sensors. A massive fleet of unidentified ships was approaching human-controlled space. Alexander felt a chill run down his spine as he studied the sensor readings. The composition and capabilities of the approaching fleet were unlike anything they had encountered before. "Alert all commands," he ordered, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We may be facing a new player in this conflict, and we need to be ready." As the alert went out, Alexander gazed out at the sprawling expanse of New Singapore. The colony, with its mix of human and Kobali inhabitants, represented everything they were fighting for, and everything that was now at risk. The approach of this unknown fleet marked a new chapter in their struggle. Alexander knew that the challenges they had faced so far might pale in comparison to what lay ahead. But as he watched humans and Kobali working side by side to build a future together, he felt a flicker of hope. Whatever this new threat might be, they would face it together. The real test of Operation Lighthouse was just beginning. The real test of Operation Lighthouse was about to unfold in ways Alexander could never have anticipated. The sensors blared with urgent warnings as the massive unidentified fleet entered the outer reaches of human-controlled space. Alexander rushed to the command center, where Colonel Hawthorne was already coordinating a flurry of activity. "Status report," Alexander demanded, his eyes scanning the holographic display of the approaching armada. Hawthorne's face was grim. "It's unlike anything we've ever seen, Ward. Size, configuration, energy signatures, they're off the charts. We're activating every defense system we've got, but I'm not sure it'll be enough." Alexander nodded, his mind racing. "Alert all colonies. Full evacuation protocols for non-essential personnel. And get me a direct line to New Singapore's planetary defense grid." As the command center erupted into action, Dr. Marcus Evans' face appeared on a nearby screen. "Commander Ward, we've had a breakthrough with the Kobali genetics. You need to see this immediately." "On my way," Alexander replied, turning to Hawthorne. "Keep me updated on the fleet's movements. I'll be in the medical bay." Alexander sprinted through the corridors, arriving at the medical facility breathless. Dr. Evans greeted him with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "We've stabilized the genetic modifications in the rescued Kobali," Evans explained, pulling up complex DNA models on his workstation. "But that's not all. We've discovered that a carefully controlled fusion of human and Kobali DNA could potentially create individuals with extraordinary abilities." Alexander's eyes widened as he processed the implications. "Are you saying we could enhance our own people?" Evans nodded. Theoretically, yes. But the ethical considerations dash. Their conversation was cut short by a priority alert from Colonel Hawthorne. Ward, we have a new development. Report to Briefing Room 3 immediately. Upon entering the briefing room, Alexander found Hawthorne with a stern-faced man he didn't recognize. Commander Ward, this is Captain Ethan Reeves, Hawthorne introduced. He's our top expert in xenorelations. I'm assigning him to lead a special task force integrating the Kobali refugees into our defense efforts. Reeves stepped forward, his posture rigid but his eyes sharp and intelligent. Commander, I've reviewed the situation. We need to move quickly to build trust and cooperation between the human colonists and Kobali refugees. I have some unorthodox methods that I believe will be effective. Before Alexander could respond, Ambassador Blackwell burst into the room, flanked by a security detail. We have a critical situation, he announced, his face pale. I've received evidence linking several Galactic Council members directly to the Crimson Syndicate leadership. The room fell silent as the weight of this revelation sank in. Alexander was the first to speak. This gives us leverage, but it also puts an even bigger target on our backs. Their strategic discussion was interrupted by a breathless junior officer. Sirs, long-range scans of the approaching fleet. They're showing Kobali markings. Ancient Kobali markings. The news sent shockwaves through the command staff. Alexander's mind raced with the potential implications. We need to contain this information, he said firmly. If it spreads among the Kobali refugees dash. But it was too late. Reports were already coming in of growing unrest among the Kobali population on New Singapore. Zara, the militant Kobali leader, was rallying her followers with promises of salvation from their long-lost kin. Alexander turned to Captain Reeves. Your task force just became our top priority. We need to integrate Zara's group into our defense plans before this situation spirals out of control. Reeves nodded grimly. I'll get started immediately, sir. As the command team dispersed to their urgent tasks, Alexander found himself staring at the holographic display of the approaching fleet. The ships were now close enough to make out individual details, their design a haunting blend of familiar Kobali aesthetics and utterly alien technology. Colonel Hawthorne approached, his voice low. I'm sending out Commander Cooper with a first contact squadron. We need to establish communication before they reach New Singapore's orbit. Alexander watched as a small group of human ships detached from the main fleet, heading towards the advance party of the mysterious Armada. The tension in the command center was palpable as everyone waited for the first exchange of signals. Suddenly, Vexlora's voice crackled over the comms. The captured Syndicate commander had been monitoring the situation from her holding cell. Commander Ward, I have critical information about a hidden Syndicate base. It contains weapon prototypes that could turn the tide against this fleet. Alexander's mind raced, weighing the risks and potential benefits of Vexlora's claim. Time was running out, and he knew the decisions he made in the next few moments could determine the fate of not just New Singapore, but all of humanity. As he opened his mouth to give orders, the first transmission from the approaching fleet came through. The message was in an ancient Kobali dialect, confirming their origins but offering no comfort. Its content was cryptic and foreboding, hinting at intentions far removed from the salvation many Kobali refugees were hoping for. Alexander steeled himself, knowing that the true test of Operation Lighthouse was only just beginning. The fate of two species now hung in the balance, with the added complication of Syndicate corruption reaching to the highest levels of galactic governance. As the mysterious fleet drew ever closer, Alexander prepared to make decisions that would shape the future of human-Kobali relations and potentially the entire galaxy. Galaxy, the cryptic message from the approaching fleet sent shockwaves through the command center. Alexander's mind raced as he processed the implications of the ancient Kobali dialect and the foreboding content. Commander Ward, a communications officer, called out, her voice tight with urgency. Commander Cooper's squadron has established first contact with the incoming vessels. Alexander moved swiftly to the main view screen, where Commander Sarah Cooper's face appeared, her expression a mix of awe and concern. "Sir, you're not going to believe this. These aren't just any Kobali ships. They're Separatists." As Cooper relayed the stunning revelation, Alexander listened intently. The fleet, led by Admiral Zoreke, consisted of Kobali who had fled their homeworld centuries ago. Far from being saviors, they had returned seeking vengeance against those they believed had abandoned them to the Crimson Syndicate's machinations. They're demanding the immediate surrender of all Kobali refugees on New Singapore, Cooper reported, her voice grim. They claim it's the only way for the Kobali species to survive. Alexander's mind raced through the potential ramifications. "This could tear the colony apart," he muttered, then turned to Colonel Hawthorne. "We need to contain this information before Dash." But it was too late. Reports flooded in of growing unrest among the Kobali population. Zara, the militant Kobali leader, was already rallying her followers, framing the Separatist arrival as an opportunity for liberation. "Captain Reeves," Alexander called out, spotting the xenorelations expert across the room. "Your task force is now our top priority. Work with the loyal Kobali to secure the refugee camps. We can't afford mass defections." Reeves nodded sharply and sprinted from the room, already coordinating with his team via his comm link. "Colonel Hawthorne, mobilize our fleet," Alexander ordered. "Position them strategically around New Singapore. We need to show strength without appearing aggressive." As Hawthorne set to work, Dr. Marcus Evans burst into the command center, his eyes wild with excitement. "Commander, we need to talk about the DNA integration program. With what's happening, I think we need to accelerate our timeline." Alexander hesitated for a split second before nodding. "Do it, but keep it small, controlled. We can't afford any mistakes." As Evans hurried back to his lab, Ambassador Blackwell approached, his face set in grit. "I'm opening a channel to Admiral Zoreke. Perhaps we can negotiate a peaceful resolution." "Good," Alexander replied. "Use the Syndicate data as leverage if you have to. We need time." Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the command center. A security officer called out, "Sir, Zara's faction is attempting to seize the main communications array." Alexander's comm link crackled to life with Captain Reeves' voice. "Commander, I'm en route with a joint human Kobali security team. We'll retake the facility, but it's going to be close." As the situation spiraled, Alexander made a snap decision. "Vexlora's information about the hidden Syndicate base. We need to act on it now." He turned to a nearby officer. "Assemble a strike team. Human Special Forces, and loyal Kobali volunteers. We're going after those weapon prototypes." As the command center erupted into a flurry of activity, Alexander strapped on his tactical gear. He knew the risks of leading this mission himself, but the potential payoff was too great to ignore. Just as he was about to depart, Commander Cooper's voice came through again, tense and urgent. "Sir, the Separatist fleet is launching probing attacks against our orbital defenses." Alexander paused at the door, looking back at the chaotic scene in the command center. The fate of New Singapore, the Kobali refugees, and perhaps the entire sector now hung in the balance. With a deep breath, he stepped into the corridor, ready to face whatever challenges awaited in the hidden Syndicate base. As his strike team boarded the stealth shuttle, Alexander couldn't shake the feeling that this mission would be the turning point in their struggle. Whether for better or worse remained to be seen. Alexander led his strike team through the winding corridors of the hidden Syndicate base, their footsteps echoing off the metallic walls. The air grew thick with tension as they encountered increasingly sophisticated defense systems. "Watch your step," Alexander warned as they approached a seemingly innocuous section of flooring. He tossed a small device ahead, revealing a complex network of laser tripwires. Kobali team, we need your bioluminescence here. Taz Rao, one of the loyal Kobali volunteers, stepped forward. His skin began to glow with an otherworldly blue light, creating interference that disrupted the laser grid. The human operatives moved swiftly through the gap, their movements fluid and practiced. As they progressed deeper into the facility, the challenges mounted. Automated turrets sprang to life, spewing plasma bolts that scorched the walls around them. Alexander's team responded with precision, their combined human and Kobali abilities proving a formidable match for the base's defenses. Meanwhile, on New Singapore, Dr. Marcus Evans stood before a massive energy containment field, his face illuminated by the pulsing blue light of Kobali bioluminescence. Increase power to the main coupling, he instructed his team, sweat beading on his forehead. We need to stabilize the field before we can scale it up for planetary defense. A group of Kobali volunteers stood nearby, their arms connected to glowing transfer tubes. As they channeled their bioluminescent energy into the experimental shielding system, many of the human scientists looked on with a mixture of awe and gratitude. One of the Kobali, Nira, spoke up, her voice tinged with hope. We never imagined our natural abilities could be used like this. Perhaps there is more that binds our species than separates us. Evans nodded, a small smile breaking through his concentrated expression. Together, we might just save this colony. High above New Singapore, Commander Sarah Cooper's voice crackled over the comms of her squadron. Evasive pattern Delta. Use the gravity well of that moon to slingshot around and hit them from behind. Her ships executed the daring maneuver, narrowly avoiding a barrage of fire from Admiral Zoreke's Separatist fleet. The human vessels arced around the small moon, using its gravitational pull to accelerate them into an attack position. Now! Cooper ordered. Her squadron unleashed a coordinated assault on the Separatist ship's aft sections, their weapons finding weak points in the advanced Kobali shields. Several of Zoreke's vessels erupted in explosions, but the victory was short-lived. A massive energy surge from the Separatist flagship sent two of Cooper's ships spinning out of control, their hulls breached and venting atmosphere. On the planet's surface, Captain Ethan Reeves led his joint human-Kobali security team through the winding alleys of the refugee camp. They moved with purpose, their weapons at the ready as they closed in on Zara's last known location. Sir, one of the Kobali security officers whispered, pointing to a nondescript shelter. Energy readings consistent with a quantum transmitter. Reeves nodded, signaling his team to take positions around the structure. As they prepared to breach, a flurry of movement caught his eye. A figure darted from the back of the shelter, sprinting toward the colony's outskirts. Zara, Reeves shouted, breaking into a run. All units, converge on my position. Do not let her reach the communication array. Back in the asteroid base, Alexander's team finally reached the central vault. The massive door slid open with a hiss, revealing rows of sleek, menacing weapons. Each device pulsed with an eerie blue glow, a twisted fusion of Syndicate technology and harvested Kobali bioluminescence. My God! Alexander breathed, taking in the sight. With these, we could turn the tide against Zoreke's fleet. But at what cost? As his team began securing the weapons, a low rumble shook the facility. Warning klaxons blared to life, and a computerized voice announced, self-destruct sequence initiated. Base structural integrity compromised. Alexander's mind raced. They had the weapons that could potentially save New Singapore, but every second they remained put his team at greater risk. The asteroid was already beginning to fracture around them. Sir, his second-in-command urged, we need to go. Now. Alexander looked at the remaining weapons, then at his team. The decision deeply affected upon him, knowing that each moment of hesitation could mean the difference between salvation and destruction. On New Singapore, Dr. Evans's team worked feverishly to bring the new planetary shields online. The air crackled with energy as they made final adjustments to the massive generators. Suddenly, a violent explosion rocked the facility. Alarms blared as smoke filled the air. Evans stumbled to a nearby console, his eyes widening in horror as he read the display. "The main power relay," he shouted over the chaos. "It's been sabotaged." Outside, fires raged where the relay station once stood. As emergency teams rushed to contain the damage, a message flashed across every screen in the colony. Surrender to Zorike and the true Kobali or face annihilation. In orbit, Commander Cooper watched in dismay as the first salvos from Zorike's fleet breached New Singapore's weakened defenses. Explosions blossomed across the planet's surface as the bombardment intensified. "All ships, form a defensive perimeter," Cooper ordered, her voice strained. "We need to intercept those bombardment runs at all costs." As her fleet scrambled to protect the vulnerable colony, a fragmentary transmission broke through the chaos. It was Alexander, his voice barely audible through the static. "Secured. Weapons. Need immediate. Extraction." Cooper's heart raced as she realized the implications. Alexander's team had found something that could change everything, but they were trapped in a disintegrating asteroid base. She looked at her tactical display, knowing that diverting ships for a rescue could leave New Singapore exposed. Before she could make a decision, another transmission cut through all channels. It was Ambassador Blackwell, his face grim but determined. "To all ships in the New Singapore system, human and Kobali alike. I have evidence of a conspiracy that has manipulated us all. The Crimson Syndicate, the Galactic Council, even elements within our own governments, they have orchestrated this conflict for their own gain." As Blackwell's revelations poured forth, confusion spread through both fleets. On the Separatist ships, murmurs of dissent began to grow. Admiral Zorike's own crew exchanged uneasy glances, their certainty in their cause beginning to waver. Down on the planet's surface, humans and Kobali alike paused in their frantic efforts, absorbing the shocking truth. In that moment of shared disbelief, a new understanding began to form between the two species. But even as this revelation threatened to reshape the conflict, the immediate dangers remained. Alexander's team raced against time in the crumbling asteroid base. Commander Cooper's fleet strained to hold back the Separatist assault. Captain Reeves and his forces closed in on Zara, knowing her capture could prevent further sabotage. And across New Singapore, a united front of humans and Kobali worked desperately to bring the new planetary shields online, their efforts now driven by the knowledge of a common enemy. The next few hours would determine not just the fate of the colony, but the future of human-Kobali relations and the balance of power in the galaxy itself. Alexander's team raced through the collapsing tunnels of the asteroid base, the newly acquired weapons jostling in their arms. The ground beneath their feet trembled, chunks of rock and metal raining down around them. "This way!" Alexander shouted, gesturing toward a narrow passage. They sprinted forward, ducking under falling debris and leaping over widening cracks in the floor. As they rounded the final corner, their extraction vessel came into view, its engines already humming with pre-flight checks. The team scrambled aboard, Alexander bringing up the rear. "Go! Go! Go!" he yelled to the pilot as the airlock sealed shut. The ship lurched away from the disintegrating asteroid, narrowly avoiding a massive chunk of rock that threatened to crush them. Through the view screen, Alexander watched as the hidden base imploded, collapsing in on itself before vanishing in a brilliant flash of light. He turned his attention to the secured weapons, his brow furrowing as he examined them more closely. "These aren't just disruptors," he muttered. "They're targeting both energy fields and organic tissue. The destructive potential is astounding." Back on New Singapore, Dr. Marcus Evans stared in disbelief at the smoldering ruins of the power relay station. Smoke billowed into the sky, obscuring the stars above. The sabotage had dealt a crippling blow to their defense plans. "We need to reroute power from the secondary grid," Evans called out to his team. "And someone get me a damage assessment." As human technicians scrambled to salvage what they could, a group of Kobali refugees approached. Their leader, a tall, slender female named Kira, stepped forward. "We wish to help," she said, her bioluminescent skin pulsing with persistence. "This act of betrayal does not represent all Kobali. Many of us believe in cooperation, not destruction." Evans nodded gratefully. "We'll take all the help we can get. Let's see what your bioluminescent abilities can do to boost our power output." In orbit, Commander Sarah Cooper's voice crackled over the comms. "Epsilon Squadron, form up on me. We're going to use that gas giant's gravity well to slingshot around and hit their flank." Her ships executed a daring maneuver, accelerating around the massive planet and emerging behind the Separatist fleet. Taken by surprise, several Kobali vessels fell to the sudden assault. "Commander," one of her pilots called out. "New contacts incoming." "It's the extraction team with Commander Ward." Cooper allowed herself a small smile. "Provide them cover. We need those weapons planetside ASAP." On the surface, Captain Ethan Reeves and his team had cornered Zara in an abandoned warehouse. The air was thick with tension as they faced off against the Separatist leader and her remaining loyalists. "It's over, Zara," Reeves called out, his weapon trained on the Kobali woman. "You've got nowhere left to run. Surrender now, and we can end this without further bloodshed." Zara's eyes darted between Reeves and her followers. The sound of distant explosions punctuated the tense silence. Finally, she lowered her weapon. "You don't understand," she said, her voice heavy with resignation. "We were promised freedom, a chance to rebuild our civilization without interference. But now I see, we were all deceived." As Zar began to reveal the full extent of the Separatist plans, Alexander's team touched down at the new Singapore spaceport. They rushed to unload the experimental weapons, their faces grim with the knowledge of the destruction they carried. Colonel James Hawthorne met them on the landing pad, his uniform covered in dust and soot. "Glad to see you made it back in one piece," he said, eyeing the weapons. "What are we dealing with here?" Alexander quickly briefed the colonel on the weapons' capabilities and their considerable power requirements. Hawthorne's expression grew more concerned with each passing moment. "We'll need to coordinate with Dr. Evans," Hawthorne said finally. "If these weapons are as powerful as you say, they might be our only chance to turn the tide. But we can't risk deploying them without fully understanding the consequences." As they made their way to the command center, a group of Kobali defectors approached, led by a striking female scientist. "I am Lyra," she introduced herself. "We have abandoned Admiral Zoreke's cause and wish to offer our assistance. I have extensive knowledge of our fleet's capabilities and weaknesses." Hawthorne exchanged a glance with Alexander before nodding. "We'll take all the help we can get. Come with us." In the command center, Dr. Evans and his team were working feverishly to bring the partial planetary shields online. The room hummed with the combined efforts of human and Kobali scientists, their bioluminescent glow casting an otherworldly light on the equipment. "We've managed to protect the most critical areas," Evans reported as Hawthorne and the others entered. "But large portions of the planet remain exposed. We need more power to expand the shield coverage." Alexander stepped forward, gesturing to the weapons they had recovered. "We might have a solution, but it's risky. These weapons require an enormous power source to function. If we could integrate them with the Kobali bioluminescent shielding technology." Evans' eyes widened as he grasped the implications. A synergy between offense and defense. It's brilliant but incredibly dangerous. We'd be combining two highly unstable and poorly understood technologies. Hawthorne looked out the command center window, where flashes of light in the sky marked the ongoing battle in orbit. Admiral Zorake's forces were pressing their advantage, their bombardment intensifying with each passing minute. "We're running out of options," Hawthorne said grimly. "What do you need to make this happen?" "Work," Hawthorne asked, his eyes fixed on the experimental weapons. Dr. Evans ran his hand through his disheveled hair, his mind racing with calculations. "We'll need to integrate these weapons with our existing power grid and the Kobali bioluminescent shielding technology. It's risky, but it might be our only chance." Alexander nodded, his expression grim. "Let's do it. We don't have time for hesitation." As the team rushed to implement their daring plan, the command center erupted into a flurry of activity. Human technicians worked alongside Kobali volunteers, their combined efforts creating a symphony of keystrokes and urgent commands. Dr. Evans directed the operation, his voice carrying across the room. "We need to distribute the power load across multiple nodes. It's the only way to prevent a catastrophic overload." Alexander stepped forward, drive etched on his face. "I'll lead teams to set up the distribution nodes across the planet. We'll need both human and Kobali volunteers for this." Lyra, the Kobali defector, offered her assistance. "Our bioluminescence can help stabilize the energy flow. I'll gather a group of willing Kobali to join your teams." As Alexander and Lyra organized their rapid deployment operation, Commander Cooper's voice crackled over the comms. "New Singapore, be advised. Zorake is concentrating his fleet's firepower on a single point in our shields. We can't hold them off much longer." Hawthorne's face paled at the news. "Evans, we need that weapon system online now. We're working as fast as we can," Evans replied, his fingers flying over a console. "But if we rush this, we risk blowing out the entire power grid." Outside, the sky lit up with the flashes of orbital combat. The remaining planetary shields flickered and strained under the relentless barrage from Zorake's forces. Alexander's team spread out across New Singapore, racing against time to establish the power distribution network. Humans and Kobali worked side by side, their differences forgotten in the face of imminent destruction. At one of the distribution nodes, Alexander wiped sweat from his brow as he connected power conduits. A young Kobali named Tarak worked beside him, the alien's bioluminescent skin pulsing with exertion. "How are we doing on time?" Alexander asked, glancing at the sky. Tarak's luminescence flickered in a pattern Alexander had come to recognize as anxiety. "Not good. I can feel the shields weakening. We need to hurry." In orbit, Commander Cooper made a split-second decision. "All ships, this is Cooper. We're entering the atmosphere to reinforce the planetary shields. Brace for extreme maneuvers." Her fleet plunged into New Singapore skies, their shields merging with the planet's defenses to create a patchwork barrier against Zorake's assault. Back in the command center, Dr. Evans watched as the power levels across the new distribution network stabilized. "We're ready. Initiating weapons system. Now." A surge of energy coursed through the newly established network. Across New Singapore, the power nodes lit up with a brilliant bioluminescent glow. The energy coalesced into a massive, shimmering field that enveloped the entire planet. As Zorake's fleet fired another devastating salvo, the integrated weapons and shielding system responded. A blinding eruption of bioluminescent energy burst from the planet's surface, engulfing the attacking ships. The effect was immediate. Separatist vessels caught in the energy field began to drift aimlessly, their systems overloaded and disrupted by the unique properties of the weapon. Commander Cooper's voice rang out with renewed vigor. "All ships, press the attack. Target Zorake's flagship." The human fleet, bolstered by defected Kobali vessels, surged forward. They struck at the heart of the now vulnerable Separatist armada, their weapons finding gaps in the enemy's faltering defenses. On the planet's surface, Alexander and his teams worked feverishly to maintain the integrity of the power distribution network. Alarms blared as energy levels spiked dangerously. "We're losing containment in Sector 7. A technician shouted over the comm. Alexander sprinted towards the failing node, Turok close on his heels. They arrived to find sparks flying from overloaded circuitry. "We need to reroute power through the secondary conduits," Alexander yelled over the noise. Turok nodded, his bioluminescence intensifying as he placed his hands on the conduits. The Kobali's natural glow seemed to calm the erratic energy flow, giving Alexander the chance to make the necessary adjustments. As the battle raged above, and the planet's defenders fought to maintain their new weapon, long-range sensors picked up an alarming reading. A massive fleet of unknown origin was approaching the system at high speed. In the command center, Colonel Hawthorne stared at the sensor readouts in disbelief. "What now?" he muttered, his mind racing to process this new development. Dr. Evans looked up from his console, his face a mixture of exhaustion and concern. "Sir, we're detecting energy signatures unlike anything we've seen before. Whatever's coming, it's not Syndicate, Kobali, or anything else in our database." The news spread quickly through the ranks of both defenders and attackers. Even as they continued to exchange fire, a sense of uncertainty gripped every ship and soldier. The unknown fleet drew closer, its intentions a mystery that could reshape the entire conflict. Commander Cooper's voice cut through the tension. "All ships maintain formation. We don't know if these newcomers are friend or foe. Be prepared for anything." As the mysterious fleet entered the system, the battle for New Singapore hung in the balance. The next few moments would determine not just the fate of the colony, but potentially the future of human-Kobali relations and the balance of power in the entire sector. The defenders of New Singapore braced themselves for whatever came next, knowing that their actions in the coming hours would echo through history. The unknown fleet's arrival sent ripples of tension through the battlefield. Human defenders, Kobali allies, and even Admiral Zoreke's Separatist forces paused their conflict, all eyes turning to the new potential threat. In the Planetary Command Center, Colonel James Hawthorne barked orders, his voice cutting through the sudden silence. "All sensors, focus on those incoming ships. I want to know who they are and what they're capable of." The massive vessels drew closer, their markings becoming clearer. Alexander Ward, having just stabilized a critical power node, rushed to a nearby display. His eyes widened as he recognized symbols associated with various species affiliated with the Galactic Council. "Colonel," he called out, "those ships, they're not just one species. It's a coalition force." As if in response to Alexander's observation, the impressive flagship at the forefront of the Armada initiated communication. The screens in the command center flickered to life, revealing the stern visage of a being Alexander recognized from his diplomatic briefings. "This is High Admiral Krelvor of the Galactic Coalition," the alien figure announced, its multifaceted eyes scanning the room. "We have come in response to the evidence of corruption and criminal activities exposed by Ambassador Marcus Blackwell. All hostilities will cease immediately. We demand a diplomatic resolution to this conflict." The command center erupted into a flurry of activity. Colonel Hawthorne exchanged quick glances with Dr. Evans and Alexander before responding. "High Admiral, this is Colonel James Hawthorne of New Singapore. We welcome the opportunity for a peaceful resolution." In orbit, Commander Sarah Cooper watched as several of Admiral Zoreke's ships broke formation, signaling their surrender. Her comm crackled with Hawthorne's voice. "Cooper, stand down and assume defensive posture. Things just got a lot more complicated." "Understood, sir," she replied, ordering her battered fleet to regroup around New Singapore. On the planet's surface, the strain on the integrated weapons and shielding system reached critical levels. Alexander's team worked frantically to maintain the power distribution network, their hands flying over controls as alarms blared around them. We need to reduce power output. Dr. Evans shouted over the din. The system can't handle this level of strain. Alexander nodded, his face slick with sweat. Tarak, help me reroute power through the secondary conduits. We need to ease the load on the primary nodes. As they worked, a series of small, fast shuttles launched from Krelvor's flagship, descending towards New Singapore. Colonel Hawthorne's voice came through Alexander's comm unit. Ward, we've got coalition observers and negotiators incoming. I need you to secure that weapons tech. We can't risk unauthorized access. On it, sir, Alexander replied, already moving to implement stricter security protocols. The shuttles pierced New Singapore's atmosphere, their occupants marveling at the spectacular display of bioluminescent energy enveloping the planet. As they touched down, Captain Ethan Reeves and his security team stood ready, their expressions a mix of wariness and hope. In the command center, Ambassador Marcus Blackwell prepared for the most challenging negotiations of his career. He pored over data pads, absorbing last-minute intelligence briefings on the various species represented in the coalition. Marcus, Colonel Hawthorne approached, his voice low. Zorakes making a play for the Kobali refugees. He's broadcasting some kind of appeal to their shared heritage. We need to stay on top of this. Blackwell nodded grimly. I'll address it in the initial talks. We can't afford any internal conflicts now. As the coalition observers disembarked from their shuttles, they were immediately struck by the unique collaboration they witnessed. Humans and Kobali worked side by side, their combined efforts visible in the pulsing bioluminescent network that covered the planet. Dr. Evans found himself surrounded by a diverse group of alien scientists, all clamoring for information about the integrated weapons and shielding technology. The synergy between human ingenuity and Kobali bioluminescence is unprecedented, he explained, gesturing to a nearby power node. It's opened up possibilities we never imagined. Meanwhile, Alexander Ward oversaw the implementation of new security measures around the experimental weapons. He instructed a mixed team of human and Kobali guards, emphasizing the importance of their task. No one accesses this technology without direct authorization from Colonel Hawthorne or myself, he stated firmly. The potential for misuse is too great. As night fell on New Singapore, the bioluminescent energy network cast an ethereal glow across the planet's surface. In the command center, Ambassador Blackwell prepared to enter the negotiation chamber, where representatives from all parties awaited. Colonel Hawthorne caught his arm just before he entered. Good luck in there, Marcus. The fate of a lot more than just New Singapore rests on what happens next. Blackwell nodded, squaring his shoulders. As the door slid open, he stepped into a room filled with tension and possibility. Human, Kobali, and coalition representatives turned to face him, the future of galactic relations hanging in the balance. Outside, the combined fleets of humanity, Kobali Separatists, and the Galactic Coalition held their positions, weapons primed but silent. On the planet's surface, Alexander Ward and his team continued their vigilant watch over the power distribution network, ready to react to any new developments. The negotiation chamber fell silent as Ambassador Blackwell took his place at the table. He looked around at the assembled faces, each representing a different stake in the complex web of galactic politics. With a deep breath, he began to speak, his words carrying the weight of humanity's future in the cosmos. Galactic stage. As dawn broke over New Singapore, the ethereal glow of the bioluminescent energy network gradually faded, giving way to the warm light of the rising sun. Ambassador Marcus Blackwell stood at the window of the hastily prepared conference center, his reflection superimposed over the bustling activity outside. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the complex negotiations ahead. The conference room doors slid open, and Alexander Ward entered, followed closely by Dr. Marcus Evans. Both men looked weary but determined, Ambassador, Alexander said, nodding respectfully. We're ready when you are. Blackwell turned from the window, his expression resolute. Let's begin. The trio made their way to the main chamber, where representatives from the Kobali refugees, surrendered Separatists, and the Galactic Coalition led by High Admiral Krelvor were already assembled. The air was thick with tension as Blackwell took his seat at the head of the table. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice steady and clear. We are here to address several critical issues that will shape the future of not just New Singapore, but potentially the entire sector. As Blackwell outlined the key points of negotiation, Alexander noticed the coalition members leaning forward with particular interest when the topic of the human Kobali integrated weapons and shielding technology arose. Outside the conference center, Colonel James Hawthorne stood on the bridge of the orbital command station, overseeing the integration of surrendered Separatist ships into the temporary Joint Defense Force. He watched as human and Kobali crews worked side by side, their movements still awkward and hesitant. Status report. Hawthorne barked into his comm unit. Sir, came the reply from a human officer. We've successfully integrated 60% of the Separatist vessels into our defense grid. There have been minor incidents, but nothing we couldn't handle. Hawthorne nodded, his eyes fixed on the ships maneuvering in orbit. Keep at it. I want a unified presence up here, understood? Down on the planet's surface, Captain Ethan Reeves walked through one of the Kobali refugee camps, flanked by both human and Kobali security officers. The atmosphere was tense, with small groups of Kobali huddled together, speaking in hushed tones. Reeves approached a makeshift community center where a cultural exchange program was underway. Inside, he found human colonists and Kobali refugees engaged in animated discussions, sharing stories and traditions. How's it going here? Reeves asked one of the program coordinators. The young woman smiled, though her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. Slow progress, sir, but progress nonetheless. We've had some breakthroughs in understanding each other's customs. As the second day of negotiations began, alarms suddenly blared throughout the command center. Colonel Hawthorne rushed to the main console, his face illuminated by the flashing red lights. Report, he shouted. A sensor operator's voice crackled over the comm. Sir, long-range sensors have detected a group of Crimson Syndicate ships entering the system. They appear to be unaware of our current situation. Hawthorne's mind raced as he assessed the situation. Alert the Coalition fleet. Move to intercept. And get me Ambassador Blackwell immediately. In the conference room, the negotiations came to an abrupt halt as Blackwell received the urgent message. The room erupted into a flurry of activity as representatives demanded information and assurances. High Admiral Krelvor's multifaceted eyes fixed on Blackwell. Ambassador, perhaps this is an opportunity to demonstrate the effectiveness of your new technology? Before Blackwell could respond, another voice cut through the chaos. I can help. All eyes turned to see Admiral Zorike, flanked by guards, standing in the doorway. I know Syndicate tactics. Let me assist in coordinating a defense strategy. Blackwell exchanged quick glances with Alexander and Dr. Evans, weighing the risks and potential benefits of Zorike's offer. The room fell silent, waiting for his decision. In orbit, the Coalition fleet moved to intercept the incoming Syndicate ships. Commander Victor Rask, at the helm of the squadron, pushed his ships ahead of the main force. All units, form up on me. Rask's voice crackled over the comm. We'll cut off their retreat vector. As the Syndicate ships realized they were outgunned, they attempted to flee. Rask's aggressive pursuit forced them deeper into the system, closer to New Singapore. On the planet's surface, Dr. Evans and his team worked feverishly in the main research facility, refining the integrated weapons and shielding system. Holographic displays flickered around them, showing real-time data from the orbital engagement. We need to stabilize the power output, Evans muttered, his fingers flying over the controls. If we can manage that, we might be able to extend the system's range to cover the entire fleet. Alexander Ward burst into the facility, his face grim. Doctor, we need to lock down all non-essential data on the weapons system. Coalition observers are getting too curious. As they worked to secure the technology, Ambassador Blackwell's voice came over the facility speakers. Dr. Evans, Mr. Ward, prepare the integrated weapons system for potential deployment. We may need to use it against the Syndicate ships as a demonstration of our capabilities. Alexander and Evans shared a look of concern. Using the experimental technology on such a scale carried significant risks, but they understood the potential diplomatic value of such a display. In space, Commander Rath's pursuit of the Syndicate ships grew increasingly reckless. His squadron pushed their engines to the limit, closing the distance rapidly. Sir, one of Rath's officers warned, we're pushing too hard. The Syndicate ships are showing signs of stress. Rask ignored the warning, his focus solely on cornering their prey. Suddenly, one of the Syndicate vessels erupted in a brilliant explosion, its engine core breaching under the strain of the pursuit. Pull back! Colonel Hawthorne's voice boomed over the comm. All ships, pull back immediately. But it was too late. The damaged Syndicate ship began to drift, its trajectory taking it dangerously close to New Singapore's atmosphere. Debris from the explosion scattered across space, threatening both the pursuing Coalition ships and the planet below. As alarms blared across New Singapore, Colonel Hawthorne initiated emergency protocols. All available ships moved to intercept that debris. We need to prevent it from entering the atmosphere at all costs. In the conference room, Ambassador Blackwell watched the unfolding crisis with a mix of dread and persistence. He turned to the assembled representatives, his mind racing to find a solution that would address both the immediate threat and the long-term diplomatic implications. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice cutting through the tension, I believe we have an opportunity here, a chance to demonstrate not just the power of our technology, but the strength of our newfound cooperation. As Blackwell outlined his plan, Alexander Ward was already moving. He activated his comm unit, contacting a select group of human and Kobali operatives. This is Ward. Assemble at Docking Bay 3 immediately. We have a high-risk mission to neutralize a Syndicate threat. The stage was set for a critical moment that would test the limits of the fragile alliance between humans, Kobali, and the Galactic Coalition. As New Singapore braced for impact, the actions of those in orbit and on the surface would determine not just the fate of the colony, but the future of interstellar relations. Relations hanging in the balance. As Blackwell began to outline his proposal, alarms suddenly blared throughout the command center, cutting through the tense atmosphere. Colonel Hawthorne's voice crackled over the intercom. Ambassador, we have a situation. Crimson Syndicate ships have entered the system. The room erupted into chaos as representatives demanded information and assurances. Blackwell raised his hands, calling for calm. Ladies and gentlemen, please. This may be an opportunity to demonstrate not just the power of our technology, but the strength of our newfound cooperation. High Admiral Krelvor's multifaceted eyes fixed on Blackwell. Ambassador, are you suggesting we use your integrated weapons system against the Syndicate? Before Blackwell could respond, Admiral Zorke stepped forward. I can assist in coordinating a defense strategy. I know Syndicate tactics. Blackwell nodded, his mind racing. Colonel Hawthorne, prepare to deploy the integrated weapons system. Dr. Evans, Mr. Ward, I need you to oversee the operation. As the Coalition fleet moved to intercept the Syndicate ships, Alexander Ward assembled a special operations team. This is Ward. Assemble at Docking Bay 3 immediately. We have a high-risk mission to neutralize a Syndicate threat. In orbit, Commander Victor Rath's aggressive pursuit forced the Syndicate ships deeper into the system. Suddenly, one of the vessels erupted in a brilliant explosion, its engine core breaching under the strain. "Pull back!" Colonel Hawthorne's voice boomed over the comm. "All ships, pull back immediately." But it was too late. The damaged Syndicate ship began to drift towards New Singapore's atmosphere, leaving a trail of debris in its wake. On the planet's surface, Dr. Evans and his team worked feverishly in the main research facility. Holographic displays flickered around them, showing real-time data from the orbital engagement. "We need to stabilize the power output," Evans muttered, his fingers flying over the controls. "If we can manage that, we might be able to extend the system's range to cover the entire fleet." As the multiple crises converged, Colonel Hawthorne authorized the deployment of the integrated weapons system. Dr. Evans, working with a joint team of human and Kobali technicians, prepared the weapon for its first real-world test under the watchful eyes of Coalition observers. "Initiating power-up sequence," a Kobali technician announced, her bioluminescent skin pulsing with excitement. Evans nodded, his eyes fixed on the main display. "Capacitors charging. Weapon will be ready in 30 seconds. Meanwhile, Alexander Ward's team approached their target Syndicate ship in a modified stealth shuttle. The vessel's hull was dark, barely visible against the backdrop of space. "Remember," Ward's voice came through the team's comms, "our primary objective is to secure their computer core. We need that intelligence." Kira, a Kobali engineer on Ward's team, flexed her fingers, causing waves of bioluminescence to ripple across her skin. "I'm ready to light the way, sir." As they prepared to board, the situation on New Singapore's surface grew tense. Captain Ethan Reeves received an urgent alert from one of the Kobali refugee camps. "Sir," a breathless security officer reported, "we've got a group of Separatist sympathizers attempting to seize the communications array in Sector 7. Reeves gritted his teeth. "Deploy non-lethal countermeasures. We need to contain this without escalating the situation." In orbit, Commander Rath's pursuit of the Syndicate ships grew increasingly reckless. The damaged vessel's trajectory became more erratic, posing a greater threat to New Singapore with each passing moment. Colonel Hawthorne's voice cut through the chaos. "Dr. Evans, we need that weapon online now." "Sir," Evans replied, his voice strained. "Activating the system at full capacity could overload the planet's power grid. We're looking at potential widespread blackouts." In the conference room, Ambassador Blackwell made a bold decision. He turned to the assembled coalition representatives, his expression grave but determined. "I propose a compromise," he began. "We'll share limited technical data on our integrated weapons system in exchange for immediate assistance with the Syndicate threat and support for a joint human-Kobali colonization effort." The room erupted into a flurry of hushed conversations and heated debates. Some saw it as an unprecedented opportunity for cooperation, while others expressed concern about shifting the balance of power. As negotiations continued, Ward's team made their way through the dark corridors of the Syndicate ship. Kira's bioluminescent abilities proved invaluable, allowing them to navigate without detection. "Computer core should be 2 levels down," Ward whispered, checking a holographic map projected from his wrist device. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship. "Intruder alert! Security teams to Deck C." Ward cursed under his breath. "Move! We need to secure that data before they lock us out." Back on New Singapore, Dr. Evans gave the command to activate the integrated weapons system. A massive surge of bioluminescent energy engulfed the approaching Syndicate ships, disabling their systems and bringing them to a complete stop. The effect was immediate and awe-inspiring. Coalition observers watched in stunned silence as the enemy fleet hung motionless in space, their systems completely neutralized. However, the use of the weapon came at a heavy cost. Across New Singapore, power grids failed in cascading blackouts. Emergency systems kicked in, but vital infrastructure was left operating on limited backup power. "We've lost primary power to the medical facilities in sectors 3 through 7, a technician reported, her voice tight with concern. Evans ran his hands through his hair, his face illuminated by the dim emergency lighting. "Divert all available power to critical systems. We need to stabilize the grid before we lose life support." As the Syndicate ships were neutralized, the failing engines of the damaged vessel finally gave out. The ship broke apart, scattering debris towards New Singapore's atmosphere. Colonel Hawthorne's voice crackled over the comm system. "All available power to the planetary shields. We need to protect the surface from that debris." On the ground, Captain Reeves and his team faced a growing crisis. The power outages had sparked panic among both human colonists and Kobali refugees. Reports of looting and violence began to pour in from across the settlement. "Sir," a security officer called out, "we've got reports of a mob forming near the main power distribution hub. They're demanding answers." Reeves nodded grimly. "Deploy riot control units. Use minimal force. Our priority is to maintain order and prevent casualties." In space, Ward's team fought their way through the Syndicate ship security forces. The narrow corridors echoed with the sound of energy weapons and shouted orders. "Kira, how much longer?" Ward called out, ducking behind a bulkhead as energy bolts sizzled past. The Kobali engineer's hands flew over the computer terminal, her skin pulsing with intense concentration. "Almost there. Just need to bypass their final firewall." Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the ship. Ward's comm crackled to life with an urgent message from the Coalition fleet. "All boarding parties, evacuate immediately. The Syndicate vessel's reactor is going critical." Ward made a split-second decision. "Kira, grab what you can. We're leaving now." As the team raced towards their extraction point, they found their original escape route cut off by debris and enemy forces. Ward's mind raced, searching for alternatives. "New plan," he announced, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We're scuttling the ship. Prepare for emergency spacewalk to the nearest Coalition vessel." The team worked quickly, setting charges on the ship's vital systems. As they made their way to the airlock, the vessel shuddered and groaned around them, its structural integrity failing. Ward took one last look at the ship's interior before sealing his helmet. "Everybody ready? On my mark. We blow the charges and make our jump. The explosion should cover our escape." As the team prepared for their daring spacewalk, carrying with them the stolen Syndicate data, New Singapore hung in the balance. The successful demonstration of the integrated weapons system had proven the potential of human-Kobali cooperation, but at a significant cost. Ambassador Blackwell stood at the window of the conference room, watching as debris from the battle streaked across the sky. He knew that the decisions made in the coming hours would shape not only the fate of New Singapore, but also humanity's place in the galactic community. The ambassador took a deep breath, steeling himself for the difficult negotiations ahead. As he turned back to face the assembled representatives, the weight of responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders. The future of interstellar relations hung in the balance, and every word, every decision would be crucial. Critical for the future of interstellar relations. As the immediate threat subsided, the true scope of the crisis became apparent. New Singapore's infrastructure, pushed beyond its limits by the integrated weapons system, lay in disarray. Emergency lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the once bustling colony. Dr. Marcus Evans stood in the dimly lit control room, his face illuminated by the soft glow of holographic displays. He turned to the assembled team of human and Kobali engineers, their faces a mix of willpower and exhaustion. "All right, people," Evans said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Our priority is to restore power to critical systems. We need to get the medical facilities back online immediately." A Kobali engineer, her skin pulsing with bioluminescent patterns, stepped forward. Dr. Evans, we've identified several damaged power relays in sectors 3 through 7. If we can repair those, we should be able to stabilize the grid. Evans nodded, quickly assessing the information on his datapad. Good work. Let's split into teams. I want human Kobali pairs working on each relay. We'll need both our expertise to get through this. As the engineering teams dispersed, Ambassador Marcus Blackwell paced the conference room, his mind racing. The Coalition representatives watched him expectantly, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. Blackwell took a deep breath and addressed the group. Ladies and gentlemen, recent events have demonstrated both the potential and the risks of our alliance. But they've also provided us with a unique opportunity. He activated a holographic display, revealing a map of known Crimson Syndicate operations. Thanks to the intelligence gathered by Mr. Ward's team, we now have the means to strike a decisive blow against the Syndicate. The room erupted into murmurs as Blackwell outlined his proposal for a joint task force. Some representatives nodded in approval, while others exchanged worried glances. High Admiral Krelvor's multifaceted eyes narrowed. Ambassador, while the idea has merit, how can we be certain this intelligence is accurate? The risks of committing our forces based on potentially flawed information are significant. Blackwell met the Admiral's gaze. I understand your concerns, Admiral. That's why I'm proposing a phased approach. We'll start with smaller, surgical strikes to verify the intelligence before committing to larger operations. As the negotiations continued, Colonel James Hawthorne stood in the Orbital Defense Command Center, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of New Singapore's defenses. The recent attack had exposed critical vulnerabilities in their systems. Major, Hawthorne called to his second-in-command, I want a full review of our orbital defense network. We need to identify and reinforce weak points immediately. The Major nodded, her fingers flying over a nearby console. Sir, what about the surrendered Separatist ships? They could significantly bolster our defenses if integrated properly. Hawthorne frowned, considering the implications. Agreed, but we'll need to vet the Kobali crew members thoroughly. We can't risk compromising our security. On the surface, Captain Ethan Reeves navigated the tense streets of New Singapore. The recent crisis had exacerbated existing tensions between human colonists and Kobali refugees. As he approached the gathering crowd near the main power distribution hub, he could feel the anger and fear radiating from both species. A human colonist stepped forward, his face contorted with frustration. Captain, we demand answers. How can we trust the Kobali when their technology nearly destroyed our colony? Before Reeves could respond, a Kobali refugee pushed through the crowd. We're victims here, too. Our people are suffering just as much as yours. Reeves raised his hands, calling for calm. I understand your frustrations, but now, more than ever, we need to work together. I'm establishing a series of joint community projects to repair our infrastructure and strengthen our food supply. We need both humans and Kobali to make this work. As the crowd's anger slowly dissipated, replaced by cautious curiosity, Reeves's comm unit crackled to life. Captain, a voice urgently reported, long-range sensors have detected an incoming fleet. They're bearing the markings of the Vraxian Consortium. Reeves's blood ran cold. The Vraxians were known for their powerful trading empire and rumored connections to the Crimson Syndicate. Their approach could signal a new threat to the already fragile peace. In the secure intelligence facility, Alexander Ward pored over the data acquired from the Syndicate ship. His eyes widened as he uncovered a critical piece of information. This can't be right, he muttered, double-checking the coordinates. Sir, he called to a nearby Coalition intelligence officer. I think I've found something big. There's a hidden Syndicate base in the nearby asteroid field. It looks like a major hub for their operations in this sector. As Ward began to formulate potential strategies to target the hidden base, alarms blared throughout the colony. The Vraxian fleet had entered the system, their intentions unknown. Colonel Hawthorne's voice echoed through the command channels. All personnel to battle stations. Dr. Evans, we need the integrated weapons system online now. In the engineering bay, Evans's face fell. Colonel, the power grid is still too unstable. If we activate the system at full capacity, we risk another colony-wide blackout. As the tension mounted, Ambassador Blackwell's voice cut through the chaos. Colonel, hold your fire. I have a proposition that might just turn this crisis into an opportunity. The future of New Singapore hung in the balance as the colony faced this new threat. The decisions made in the coming hours would test the strength of the Human-Kobali alliance and shape the course of galactic politics for years to come. As the Vraxian fleet approached, New Singapore's defense forces sprang into action. Colonel James Hawthorne stood at the command center, his eyes darting between holographic displays, showing the incoming ships and the colony's compromised defenses. Major, status report on our orbital platforms, Hawthorne barked, his fingers flying over a tactical interface. Sir, we've got about 60% operational capacity. The recent power surge has left several key systems offline. The Major responded, her voice tense. Hawthorne nodded grimly. All right, we'll have to make do. Implement Protocol Theta 9. I want our remaining platforms redeployed to form a multi-layered defensive perimeter. As the orbital defenses shifted into their new configuration, Alexander Ward burst into the command center, datapad in hand. Colonel, I've got something, Ward said, his eyes gleaming with intensity. The Syndicate data we recovered, it points to a hidden base in the nearby asteroid field. It's a major hub for their operations in this sector. Hawthorne's eyebrows shot up. A Syndicate base? That close? Ward nodded. Yes, sir, and I think we have an opportunity here. If we can take it out, we'll deal a significant blow to their operations and potentially gather more intel. The colonel considered for a moment, then nodded. Agreed. Assemble a strike team. Use our best human operatives and recruit some Kobali volunteers. You'll need their expertise. As Ward left to prepare his team, Ambassador Marcus Blackwell's voice came through on the command center's comm system. Colonel Hawthorne, I have a proposition that might defuse the situation with the Vraxians, Blackwell said, his tone measured but urgent. Go ahead, Ambassador, Hawthorne replied, his attention split between the tactical displays and Blackwell's words. I'm proposing we invite the Vraxian representatives to join our ongoing negotiations. It's a risk, but it might be our best chance to avoid conflict. Hawthorne considered the implications. It's your call, Ambassador, but be prepared for things to go south quickly. As Blackwell's diplomatic gambit unfolded, the Vraxian fleet's response took everyone by surprise. The bulk of their ships, led by Trade Commodore Zaxlor, slowed their approach and transmitted signals of peaceful intent. However, a smaller group of hardline vessels broke formation, accelerating towards New Singapore with obvious hostile intent. In the colony's engineering bay, Dr. Marcus Evans and his team worked feverishly to implement the new power management system. Kobali engineers moved alongside their human counterparts, their skin pulsing with bioluminescent patterns as they interfaced with the hybrid technology. Dr. Evans, a young Kobali engineer, called out, We're seeing some unexpected results in Sector 4. The power grid. It's showing increased resistance to EM interference. Evans rushed over, his eyes widening as he examined the readings. This could be a game changer, he muttered, if we can replicate this across the entire grid. His thoughts were interrupted by the blaring of alarms. The hardline Vraxian ships had opened fire on New Singapore's orbital defenses. Colonel Hawthorne's voice echoed through the command channels. All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. Engage Protocol Omega. In orbit, the newly reorganized defense fleet sprang into action. Human and Kobali ships, including the recently integrated Separatist vessels, moved in perfect synchronization to intercept the Vraxian attackers. On the ground, panic spread through the streets of New Singapore. Captain Ethan Reeves mobilized his joint human-Kobali militia, their training kicking in as they moved to secure critical infrastructure and maintain order. Team Alpha, secure the power distribution hub. Reeves ordered through his comm unit. Beta and Gamma, I want you patrolling the main thoroughfares. Keep the civilians calm and off the streets. As the battle raged in orbit and chaos threatened to engulf the colony, Ward's strike team approached the hidden Syndicate base in the asteroid field. Their modified stealth corvette weaved through the debris, sensors on high alert for any sign of detection. "All right, team," Ward said, addressing the mix of human special forces and Kobali volunteers. "Our mission is simple. Get in, secure the data, destroy their capabilities, and get out. Watch each other's backs in there." The corvette docked with the asteroid, and the strike team moved swiftly through the airlock. As they penetrated deeper into the facility, they encountered heavy resistance from entrenched Syndicate forces. Energy weapons fire filled the narrow corridors as Ward's team fought their way towards the base's central data hub. A Kobali operative, her skin glowing with bioluminescent patterns, worked furiously to bypass the Syndicate security protocols. "Ward," she called out, "I've breached their firewalls. Downloading data now." As the team secured the vital intelligence, they stumbled upon something unexpected. Files detailing extensive links between high-ranking Vraxian officials and the Syndicate's illegal activities. Back on New Singapore, Dr. Evans made a breakthrough in stabilizing the integrated weapon system. With the power grid now bolstered by Kobali technology, he managed to bring the system online at partial capacity. "Colonel Hawthorne," Evans reported, his voice tight with tension. "The weapon is ready, but I can't guarantee how long we can maintain it at this power level." Hawthorne's response was immediate. "Understood, Doctor. We'll make it count. Targeting systems. Lock onto the lead Vraxian ships. Fire when ready." The integrated weapon system hummed to life, its bioluminescent energy building to a crescendo before lashing out at the attacking Vraxian vessels. The effect was immediate and devastating. Several ships went dark, their systems completely disabled by the alien technology. As the remaining Vraxian ships retreated, Ambassador Blackwell received an urgent communication from Ward's team. The evidence of Vraxian Syndicate collusion could change everything. Blackwell's eyes narrowed as he processed the information. He turned to address the Vraxian delegation, his voice steady and determined. "Gentlemen," he began, "I believe we have some new matters to discuss regarding the future of our relationships and your connections to certain unsavory elements in this sector." The Vraxian representatives shifted uncomfortably, aware that the balance of power in the negotiations had just shifted dramatically. As Blackwell prepared to present the evidence, the future of New Singapore and its place in the complex web of galactic politics hung in the balance. As Blackwell prepared to present the evidence, the future of New Singapore and its place in the complex web of galactic politics hung in the air. The Vraxian representatives shifted uneasily in their seats as Ambassador Blackwell laid out the damning evidence of their collusion with the Crimson Syndicate. Trade Commodore Zaxlor's face darkened, his scaled skin flushing a deep purple. "This is preposterous," Zaxlor sputtered, his translator struggling to keep up with his rapid-fire objections. "These accusations are baseless and—" Blackwell cut him off with a raised hand. "I assure you, Commodore, our evidence is quite substantial. Now, we have two paths before us. We can pursue punitive measures, or we can forge a new partnership that benefits us all." The negotiations that followed were intense, stretching on for days as the colony worked to rebuild from the recent attack. Finally, after marathon sessions and countless cups of stimulant-laced beverages, an agreement was reached. The new Singapore Accords were born, severing official ties between the Vraxian Consortium and the Crimson Syndicate. As the ink dried on the Accords, a fleet of Vraxian engineering vessels entered orbit around New Singapore. Their arrival marked the beginning of a new era of cooperation and accelerated reconstruction efforts. Dr. Marcus Evans stood in the newly expanded power distribution hub, watching as human, Kobali, and Vraxian engineers worked side by side. The air hummed with the soft glow of bioluminescent conduits, pulsing with energy. Fascinating, a Vraxian technician murmured, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the shimmer of the power grid. The integration of Kobali bioluminescence with your existing infrastructure is truly remarkable. Evans nodded, a hint of pride in his voice. It's been a challenge, but the results speak for themselves. With your expertise, I believe we can push the efficiency even further. As the restoration efforts gain momentum, Alexander Ward's strike team returned from their mission to the Syndicate's hidden base. Ward strode into Colonel Hawthorne's office, his face etched with fatigue, but his eyes burning with purpose. "Mission accomplished, sir," Ward reported, handing over a data crystal. "We've got a treasure trove of intel on the Syndicate's operations, plus a few high-value prisoners." Hawthorne's eyebrows shot up. "Prisoners? That's unexpected, but it could be a game-changer." "Well done, Ward." Within hours, a high-security detention facility was established on the outskirts of the colony. Hawthorne personally oversaw the implementation of stringent security protocols, determined to prevent any escape attempts or outside interference. As New Singapore stabilized, Ambassador Blackwell turned his attention to the broader implications of their recent victories. In a coalition meeting, he laid out his vision for Operation Starfall, a joint task force dedicated to dismantling the Crimson Syndicate's network. "We have a unique opportunity," Blackwell explained, his holographic image flickering slightly as it addressed representatives from across the sector. "With the intelligence gathered from the Syndicate base and the Vraxian defection, we can strike at the heart of their operations." The proposal was met with enthusiasm, and plans for Operation Starfall quickly took shape. Captain Ethan Reeves found himself at the center of an expanding training program, as other colonies sought to replicate the success of New Singapore's integrated militia. Reeves stood before a diverse group of recruits, human and alien alike, in a newly constructed training facility. "The key to our success," he explained, "is understanding and leveraging our unique strengths. We're not just a fighting force. We're a symbol of what's possible when species work together." As word of New Singapore's victory spread, the colony experienced a surge in immigration. New arrivals from across the sector poured in, seeking safety and opportunity. The sudden population growth strained the colony's resources, forcing rapid expansion of infrastructure. Dr. Evans found himself working around the clock to establish new power generation facilities. In a cavernous underground chamber, he supervised the installation of massive bioluminescent reactors. "Careful with those connections," he called out to a team of workers. "One wrong move, and we could blow out half the grid." The expansion brought its own set of challenges, but the integrated human Kobali workforce proved adept at finding innovative solutions. Kobali engineers, their skin pulsing with intricate patterns, interfaced directly with the new systems, fine-tuning them with inhuman precision. As New Singapore grew, so did interest in its advanced defensive technologies. Coalition representatives clamored for access to the integrated weapons and shielding systems that had proved so effective against the Vraxian attack. In a secure conference room, Hawthorne, Blackwell, and other colony leaders debated the merits of sharing their technological edge. "We can't just give away our advantage," Hawthorne argued, his fist striking the table for emphasis. Blackwell leaned back, steepling his fingers. "No, but a limited sharing agreement could solidify our position within the coalition. We need allies, James." After hours of debate, a compromise was reached. A carefully crafted technology-sharing agreement was drawn up, with strict safeguards to protect the core systems. As these diplomatic maneuvers played out, Alexander Ward found himself leading a series of precision strikes against Syndicate outposts. Operation Starfall was in full swing, and Ward's mixed teams of human, Kobali, and Coalition forces moved with deadly efficiency. On a desolate moon base, Ward crouched behind a twisted piece of metal, energy bolts sizzling overhead. A Kobali operative slid into position beside him, her skin glowing faintly in the dim light. "Targets just ahead," she whispered, her eyes flickering with internal data feeds. "Heavy resistance, but nothing we can't handle." Ward nodded, signaling to the rest of the team. "Let's move. Remember, we need those data cores intact." As Operation Starfall racked up victories, intelligence reports painted a troubling picture. The Syndicate, backed into a corner, was consolidating its remaining strength for a major counteroffensive. In the command center of New Singapore, Colonel Hawthorne studied the latest threat assessments, his face grim. The Syndicate's desperation made them unpredictable, and the specter of their retaliation loomed large over the colony's recent successes. Hawthorne turned to his staff, his voice steady despite the weight of responsibility. "We've come too far to falter now. Double the patrols, accelerate the defensive upgrades. Whatever the Syndicate throws at us, we'll be ready." As New Singapore braced for the coming storm, the Human-Kobali alliance stood as a beacon of hope in a sector long plagued by conflict and mistrust. The colony had weathered attacks, forged new alliances, and now stood at the forefront of a galactic shift. But with the Crimson Syndicate cornered and preparing to strike back, the true test of their tenacity was yet to come. As New Singapore braced for the coming storm, the Human-Kobali alliance stood as a beacon of hope in a sector long plagued by conflict and mistrust. The colony had weathered attacks, forged new alliances, and now stood at the forefront of a galactic shift. But with the Crimson Syndicate cornered and preparing to strike back, the true test of their tenacity was yet to come. Colonel James Hawthorne paced a dimly lit war room, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of Operation Starfall's progress. The glowing points of light representing successful raids against Syndicate outposts were a testament to their recent victories. Yet, as he studied the map, a nagging sense of unease gnawed at him. "Something's not right," he muttered, leaning in to examine a cluster of data points. As if on cue, the door slid open, and Alexander Ward strode in, his face etched with a mix of excitement and concern. "Colonel, we've got a situation. Our latest intel drops have revealed something big." Hawthorne straightened, his full attention on Ward. "What have you found?" Ward tapped a series of commands into his datapad, and the holographic display shifted, zooming in on a remote planet near the edge of the sector. "This," he said, pointing to a pulsing red icon, "is the Syndicate's last major stronghold. It's a fortified base, unlike anything we've hit before." The colonel's eyes narrowed as he absorbed the implications. They'd been funneling resources there, consolidating their strength. Ward nodded grimly. "Exactly. This isn't just another outpost. It's their final stand." Hawthorne's mind raced, calculating the risks and potential rewards of striking at the heart of the Syndicate's remaining power. "We need to move on this quickly," he decided. "Call a strategic meeting. I want all key alliance leaders present." Hours later, the colony's leadership gathered in the secure conference room. The air was thick with tension as Ward presented his findings, laying out the formidable defenses of the Syndicate stronghold. "A frontal assault would be suicide," Ward concluded, his voice grave. "We need a multi-pronged approach to breach their defenses." Captain Ethan Reeves leaned forward, his brow furrowed in concentration. "What about the integrated weapons system? Could that give us the edge we need?" Dr. Marcus Evans, who had been quietly observing from the corner, spoke up. Theoretically, yes, but we'd need to significantly boost its power output to penetrate their shielding. As the group debated strategies, alarms suddenly blared throughout the colony. Red warning lights bathed the room in an eerie glow. What the hell? Hawthorne growled, activating the main view screen. The image flickered to life, showing chaos unfolding across New Singapore. Power fluctuations rippled through the grid, causing cascading failures in critical systems. Security barriers flickered and died, leaving vulnerable areas exposed. Evan's fingers flew across his datapad, his face pale with shock. It's a cyber attack, Colonel, and it's like nothing I've ever seen before. Hawthorne's eyes sharp. Syndicate? The scientist nodded grimly. The attack pattern matches their known tactics. But this is beyond their usual capabilities. Unless they've had inside help, Ward interjected, his voice tight with anger. The implications hung heavy in the air. The idea that Syndicate agents might have infiltrated their ranks was a chilling one, threatening to undermine the very foundation of trust they had built. Hawthorne's voice cut through the tension, sharp and decisive. Evans, get to work on containing this attack. Ward, I want a full security sweep of the colony. Captain Reeves, mobilize your militia. We need to lock this place down now. As the room emptied, people rushing to their assigned tasks, Hawthorne turned to Ambassador Marcus Blackwell. Marcus, we need to implement a diplomatic quarantine. No non-essential communication. Leaves New Singapore until we get to the bottom of this. Blackwell nodded, though concern flickered in his eyes. It'll strain our coalition relationships, but you're right. We can't risk any more leaks. Over the next several days, New Singapore transformed into a hive of frantic activity. Dr. Evans worked tirelessly, collaborating with Kobali technicians to develop new cybersecurity measures. The result was an adaptive firewall system that pulsed with bioluminescent energy, its alien algorithms proving remarkably resistant to conventional hacking attempts. Meanwhile, Captain Reeves led his joint human Kobali militia on a methodical sweep of the colony. Their efforts paid off when they uncovered a series of hidden data nodes, revealing a network of Syndicate sympathizers that had wormed their way into key positions throughout the administration and military. As Reeves' team cleared a suspected hideout in the industrial sector, a young Kobali operative named Zara suddenly held up her hand, her skin pulsing with an urgent pattern. Captain, I'm detecting unusual energy signatures beneath us. Reeves frowned, scanning the area with his enhanced visor. There's nothing on the schematics but waste processing plants down there. Zara's eyes flickered with internal data feeds. The energy output is inconsistent with waste processing. It's more like communication relays. With growing suspicion, Reeves ordered a more thorough scan of the area. What they found sent shockwaves to the colony's leadership, a hidden Syndicate communications hub, using advanced quantum entanglement devices to maintain instantaneous contact with their stronghold. As Ward received the report, a plan began to form in his mind. He turned to Colonel Hawthorne, a glint of persistence in his eyes. Sir, I think I know how we can turn this situation to our advantage. Hawthorne raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. We use their own network against them, Ward explained, his words coming faster as the plan solidified. Feed them false information. Make them think a massive coalition fleet is bearing down on their stronghold. The colonel's eyes widened as he grasped the implications. Force them to evacuate, expose themselves to an ambush. Ward nodded, a grim smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Exactly. We spring the trap, and we could potentially end the Syndicate's influence in this sector once and for all. As the pieces of the plan fell into place, a palpable sense of anticipation built throughout New Singapore. The colony had faced down threats both external and internal, emerging stronger and more united. Now! They stood on the precipice of their most ambitious operation yet. In the war room, Hawthorne studied the latest intelligence reports, acutely aware of the delicate balance they were trying to maintain. The success of their plan hinged on perfect timing and execution. One misstep, one leaked piece of information, and the Syndicate might realize the deception. As he looked up at his assembled team, Hawthorne saw the same mix of drive and tension reflected in their faces. They all understood the stakes. This operation could change the face of interstellar security in the region. "All right," Hawthorne said, his voice steady and resolute. "Let's go over the plan one more time. We've got one shot at this, people. Let's make it count. Count!" As the team dispersed to their stations, Hawthorne felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. The next few hours would determine the fate of not just New Singapore, but potentially the entire sector. The war room hummed with activity as final preparations were made. Holographic displays flickered to life, showing the positions of Alliance ships hidden within the asteroid field surrounding the Syndicate's evacuation route. Dr. Evans' voice crackled over the comms, confirming the deployment of the modified integrated weapons and shielding system. "All ships report ready, Colonel," Captain Reeves announced, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Boarding teams are standing by." Hawthorne nodded, his heart made. "Initiate Operation Starfall. Let's end this." The first indication that their plan was working came as a flurry of activity erupted from the Syndicate stronghold. Massive ships began to rise from the planet's surface, their engines glowing hot as they prepared to jump to hyperspace. "They've taken the bait," Ward's voice came through, tinged with satisfaction. "Syndicate fleet is on the move." As the Syndicate vessels entered the pre-planned kill zone, Hawthorne gave the order. "All ships, weapons free. Execute Plan Alpha." The asteroid field came alive with energy as Alliance ships decloaked, their weapon systems glowing with an eerie bioluminescent light. The first salvo caught the Syndicate completely off guard. Lances of energy tore through their lead ships, disabling shields and weapons in a devastating opening attack. Aboard his command ship, Hawthorne watched as the battle unfolded. Syndicate vessels scrambled to respond, but their formation was in chaos. "Captain Reeves, you have a go for boarding operations." Reeves' voice was steady as he replied, "Acknowledged, Colonel. Boarding teams launching now." Through the view screen, Hawthorne saw a sleek assault shuttle streak towards the disabled Syndicate ships. Each carried a mixed team of human and Kobali operatives, their complementary skills honed through months of joint training. As the space battle raged, alerts suddenly flashed across the command console. "Colonel," a communications officer called out, "we're getting reports of attacks on New Singapore's infrastructure." Hawthorne's mind raced. The Syndicate had planned for this contingency. Activate all planetary defenses. Get me a direct line to Dr. Evans. Evans' face appeared on a secondary screen, his expression grim but determined. "I see it, Colonel. The cybersecurity measures are holding, but they're hitting us hard. We'll keep them at bay." A flash of movement on the main tactical display caught Hawthorne's attention. A large Syndicate vessel was breaking away from the main group, its engines flaring with an unusual energy signature. "Sir," Ward's voice cut in urgently, "that's their flagship. They're using some kind of experimental drive. I'm moving to intercept." Hawthorne watched as Ward's interceptor shot after the fleeing vessel, weaving through the debris of battle with incredible skill. The two ships disappeared into a dense cluster of asteroids, leaving only energy trails and weapons fire visible. The battle continued to rage around them, but Hawthorne's attention was drawn to a new threat appearing on the long-range sensors. A massive Syndicate reinforcement fleet was dropping out of hyperspace on the edge of the system. "All ships, this is Colonel Hawthorne," he broadcast across the Alliance frequency. "Be advised, enemy reinforcements inbound. Prepare for Phase 2. As the words left his mouth, Hawthorne gave a silent nod to his weapons officer. Across the asteroid field, hundreds of cloaked minds suddenly activated. The approaching Syndicate fleet had no time to react as they flew into the carefully laid trap. A blinding flash lit up space as the mines detonated in sequence, creating a massive electromagnetic pulse that washed over the Syndicate ships. One by one, their systems went dark, leaving them drifting helplessly. In the sudden quiet that followed, Hawthorne allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. The tide had turned decisively in their favor. "Colonel," Reeves' voice broke through the silence, "we've secured control of multiple Syndicate vessels, including their command ship. You're not going to believe what we found." Before Hawthorne could respond, another transmission cut in. It was Ward, his voice tight with exertion but triumphant. "Target disabled and secured. So you're going to want to see who we've caught." As the Alliance forces moved to secure their hard-won victory, Hawthorne knew that the real work was just beginning. The Crimson Syndicate's power in the sector was broken, but the consequences of this battle would ripple across the galaxy. He turned to his communications officer. "Get me a secure line to Ambassador Blackwell. Tell him to prepare for a flood of diplomatic inquiries." Hawthorne's gaze swept over the tactical display, taking in the scattered remains of the Syndicate fleet. "Things are about to get very interesting." "Interesting. Things are about to get very interesting indeed." As the dust settled from their victory against the Crimson Syndicate, New Singapore found itself thrust into a new era of galactic prominence. The Human-Kobali alliance, forged in the crucible of conflict, had proven its mettle. Now, they faced the challenge of wielding their newfound influence responsibly. Ambassador Marcus Blackwell's office buzzed with activity as analysts pored over the treasure trove of data recovered from the Syndicate's captured vessels. Amidst the flood of information, a disturbing pattern emerged. "Colonel Hawthorne, you need to see this," Blackwell said, his face grim as he pulled up a holographic display. "We've uncovered evidence of widespread poaching operations targeting the Zephyrians." Hawthorne leaned in, studying the intricate web of data points. "The bioluminescent species? I thought they were under galactic protection." "They are in theory," Blackwell replied. "But these poachers have found ways to circumvent the safeguards. The Zephyrians' physical frailty makes them easy targets, despite their advanced intellect." The colonel's teeth gritted. "We can't let this stand. Not after what we've accomplished here." Over the next few weeks, a plan took shape. Dr. Evans, building on his recent breakthroughs, threw himself into developing a new suite of non-lethal weapons. The lab hummed day and night as he refined the integration of Kobali bioluminescent technology with human engineering. The key, Evans explained during a briefing, his eyes alight with enthusiasm, is precision. These weapons can incapacitate a poacher without risking harm to the Zephyrians or their environment. Meanwhile, Alexander Ward found himself tasked with assembling an elite task force. He handpicked a diverse team of human and Kobali operatives, each bringing unique skills to the table. "We're calling it Operation Starlight," Ward announced to his newly formed unit. "Our mission is to put an end to these poaching operations and send a message to the galaxy. The days of exploiting vulnerable species are over." As the task force underwent intensive training, merging human combat techniques with Kobali stealth technology, an urgent message crackled through New Singapore's command center. "This is Zephyrian Colony Epsilon. We're under attack by poachers. Please, we need immediate assistance." Hawthorne's decision was instantaneous. "Ward, your team deploys now. This is what you've trained for." Within hours, the sleek form of the stealth frigate Shadow Dancer slipped out of New Singapore's docking bay. As they approached the Zephyrian colony, the ship's advanced sensors painted a grim picture. Multiple poacher vessels detected in orbit, the tactical officer reported. "They're actively rounding up Zephyrians on the surface." Ward's mind raced through the possibilities. Deploy the satellite network. I want eyes on every inch of that planet. A swarm of miniaturized satellites, each no larger than a fist, scattered across the planet's orbit. Their Cobali-enhanced sensors pierced through the Poachers' attempts at concealment, revealing the full scope of the operation. Target locked, the weapons officer announced. Non-lethal systems charged and ready. Ward nodded grimly. Execute. Beams of concentrated energy lanced out from the Shadow Dancer, striking the Poacher vessels with surgical precision. Systems went dark across the enemy fleet as the non-lethal weapons disrupted their power grids. Ground team, you're clear to deploy, Ward ordered, strapping himself into a drop pod. Let's finish this. The surface of the Zephyrian colony was chaos. Ethereal, bioluminescent forms huddled in terror as rough-looking poachers corralled them towards waiting transport containers. The task force moved like ghosts through the alien foliage, their Cobali-enhanced suits rendering them nearly invisible. Ward raised a hand, signaling his team to halt. Ahead, a burly poacher was roughly shoving a group of terrified Zephyrians. On my mark, Ward whispered. 3, 2, 1. Execute. The task force erupted into action. Non-lethal rounds found their marks with unerring accuracy, dropping poachers before they could even register the threat. Ward himself engaged the leader, his movements a blur as he disarmed and incapacitated the man. In minutes, it was over. The poachers lay unconscious, their captives freed. As Ward's team secured the area, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This was why they had fought so hard against the Syndicate, to make the galaxy a safer place for all. Back aboard the Shadow Dancer, Ward reviewed the intelligence gathered from the captured poachers. What he found sent a chill down his spine. Colonel Hawthorne, he reported via secure channel. This goes deeper than we thought. We've uncovered links to major galactic corporations. This isn't just a few independent operators. It's an organized network. Hawthorne's expression was grim but determined. Understood, Ward. You've done good work today, but it's clear our job is far from finished. Return to base. We have a lot of planning to do. As the Shadow Dancer set course for New Singapore, Ward gazed out at the stars. They had won a victory today, but he knew it was only the beginning. The Human Cobali Alliance had taken its first steps into a larger role on the galactic stage, and the challenges ahead would test them in ways they had yet to imagine. Ward's words hung in the air as the Shadow Dancer glided through space, its stealth systems rendering it nearly invisible against the backdrop of stars. The success of their mission against the Zephyrian poachers had opened a new chapter for the Human Cobali Alliance, one that would reshape their role in galactic affairs. In the weeks that followed, New Singapore's government recognized the potential of Ward's team and their unique approach to combating interstellar crime. Colonel Hawthorne, seeing an opportunity to build on their success, authorized the formation of a dedicated task force. The Galactic Wildlife Protection Unit. Hawthorne announced during a briefing, his voice filled with pride. GWPU for short. Ward, you'll be leading this new initiative. Ward nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. We'll need a more permanent base of operations, so somewhere centrally located to cover multiple sectors. Hawthorne smiled. Already ahead of you. We've secured a moon in the Lyra system. It's strategically positioned, and more importantly, off the main trade routes. Perfect for maintaining a low profile. As the GWPU took shape, Dr. Marcus Evans threw himself into refining their non-lethal weaponry. His lab became a hive of activity, with human and Cobali scientists working side by side to push the boundaries of their technology. Check this out, Evans said one day, tossing a small, glowing sphere to Ward. New type of stun grenade. Uses Cobali bioluminescence to disrupt neural pathways. Knocks out most sentient species without any lasting damage. Ward whistled, impressed. This'll make our jobs a lot easier. Nice work, document. As the GWPU's influence grew, so did the complexity of their operations. Intelligence gathered from captured poachers revealed a web of corruption that stretched across multiple planetary governments. Hawthorne, recognizing the need for a more nuanced approach, authorized the creation of a specialized intelligence division within the GWPU. "We can't just bust heads anymore," Ward explained to his team during a briefing at their new moon base. "We need to start thinking long-term. Infiltration, surveillance, the whole 9 yards." The GWPU's efforts didn't go unnoticed. Word spread to the galactic underworld of a new force disrupting the illegal wildlife trade. But it wasn't just criminals who took notice. Ambassador Marcus Blackwell's face appeared on the main screen of the GWPU command center, his expression a mix of excitement and concern. "We received a communication from the Malorians," he said. "They're requesting our protection." Ward leaned forward, intrigued. The Malorians were notoriously reclusive, known for their advanced cloaking technology and the valuable healing substance they produced. "What's the situation?" "They've been hunted to near extinction," Blackwell explained. "Their natural cloaking abilities make them difficult to track, but the poachers are getting better at it. They need our help." Ward's mind raced, formulating a plan. "We can't just bring them here," he mused. "Too risky. We need something more distributed." Over the next few weeks, Ward and his team worked tirelessly to establish a network of hidden sanctuaries throughout the sector. These safe havens combined human stealth technology with Kobali bioluminescent camouflage, rendering them virtually undetectable to poacher scans. As the relocation of vulnerable Malorian populations began, the GWPU's intelligence division made a startling discovery. A massive poaching operation was about to target a previously unknown Malorian colony. "This is it, people," Ward addressed his team as they prepared for deployment. "Operation Starlight Sanctuary. Our biggest mission yet." The GWPU mobilized in force, multiple teams converging on the endangered colony. But as they entered the system, things quickly went sideways. "Comms are down," shouted the pilot of Ward's shuttle. "Some kind of jamming field. We're flying blind." Ward gritted his teeth, his mind racing. They'd prepared for this contingency, but it was still a major complication. "Switch to bioluminescent signaling," he ordered. "We do this the old-fashioned way." On the planet's surface, GWPU teams use coded light patterns to coordinate their movements, adapting to the communications blackout with a combination of human ingenuity and Kobali biology. The poachers, caught off guard by this unexpected tactic, found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. Hours later, as the operation wound down, Ward stood amidst a sea of captured poachers and rescued Malorians. The jamming field had finally been disabled, allowing him to contact headquarters. "Mission accomplished, Colonel," he reported, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "We've got hundreds of Malorians safe and sound, plus some high-ranking members of the poaching Syndicate in custody." Hawthorne's voice crackled over the comm. "Excellent work, Ward. But this is just the beginning. The intel from these captures. It goes deep. We've got ties to a senator in the Proxima system. This is bigger than we thought." Ward nodded grimly, watching as his teams loaded the last of the rescued Malorians onto transport ships. "Understood. Sir, what's our next move?" "We're initiating a covert operation," Hawthorne replied. "We need concrete proof of the senator's involvement. It's going to be delicate work." As Ward prepared to return to base, a series of urgent alerts lit up his comm device. Reports flooded in of coordinated attacks on GWPU outposts across the sector. "Looks like we've gotten someone's attention," Ward muttered, his mind already shifting gears to address this new threat. Back at the moon base, Dr. Evans met Ward with a gleam in his eye. "I think I've got something that can help with our security issues," he said, leading Ward to a demonstration area. "New defensive system. Integrates our force fields with Kobali bioluminescent reactive shielding." should give our bases and ships a significant edge. Ward watched as a test projectile disintegrated harmlessly against the shimmering, ever-shifting shield. Nice work, Document. We're going to need every advantage we can get. In the command center, Hawthorne stood before a holographic display of the sector, red dots indicating known poaching hubs. We've got one shot at this, he said as Ward entered. A simultaneous strike against multiple targets across 3 sectors. We're calling it Operation Starlight Cascade. Ward studied the display, his mind already formulating strategies. It's ambitious, he said, but if we pull it off, we could cripple the entire interstellar poaching network. As the GWPU threw itself into preparations for the massive operation, tension filled the air. The success or failure of Starlight Cascade would have far-reaching consequences, not just for the GWPU, but for countless vulnerable species across the galaxy. Ward looked out over the bustling activity of the base, a sense of anticipation building within him. Whatever the outcome, one thing was certain. The battle for galactic wildlife protection was about to enter a new phase, and the GWPU would be at the forefront of shaping its future. As the final preparations for Operation Starlight Cascade were made, the moon base hummed with activity. Ward stood at the command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the positions of GWPU forces across 3 sectors. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the task ahead. All teams, report in, Ward ordered, his voice calm but filled with purpose. One by one, the strike team leaders confirmed their readiness. Captain Ethan Reeves, Lieutenant Sarah Evans, and the other commanders acknowledged their positions, their voices a mix of drive and nervous energy. Remember, people, Ward said, addressing all teams. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we stick to non-lethal tactics. Let's show these poachers what the GWPU is made of. With a final nod to his command staff, Ward gave the order. Operation Starlight Cascade is a go. Execute. Across 3 sectors, GWPU ships emerged from stealth, their hulls shimmering with the otherworldly glow of Kobali bioluminescence. Poaching outposts found themselves suddenly under siege, their communication networks going dark as precision strikes disabled key relays. On board the Shadow Dancer, Ward coordinated the assault, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces as he directed the flow of battle. Suddenly, an urgent alert flashed across his screen. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a distress signal from Sanctuary 7. Ward's blood ran cold. Sanctuary 7 was one of their hidden Malorian safe havens. If it had been compromised, "Put it through," he ordered, his mind already calculating the ramifications. The frantic voice of the Sanctuary's administrator filled the command center. "This is Sanctuary 7. We've detected an incoming poacher fleet. Our location has been compromised. We need immediate assistance." Without hesitation, Ward began issuing orders. "Redirect Beta and Gamma squadrons to intercept. I'm taking the Shadow Dancer there myself." As the Shadow Dancer and its escort broke away from the main assault, Ward couldn't help but feel a twinge of worry. They had planned for every contingency, but the thought of those vulnerable Malorians in danger gnawed at him. The journey to Sanctuary 7 was tense, with Ward using the time to strategize with his team. As they dropped out of FTL, the scene before them was chaos. A swarm of poacher ships surrounded the planetoid that housed the Sanctuary, their weapons already pounding against its defensive shields. "All ships engage," Ward commanded. "Priority is protecting the Sanctuary. Use Evans' new shield disruptors to take out their defenses." The space around Sanctuary 7 erupted into a dazzling light show as GWPU ships clashed with the poacher fleet. The Shadow Dancer led the charge, its advanced weapon systems tearing through enemy shields with surgical precision. On the planetoid surface, GWPU ground teams rushed to evacuate the Malorians. The ethereal aliens' natural cloaking abilities, combined with Kobali camouflage tech, made them nearly invisible as they were ushered to waiting transports. As the battle raged, Ward received an urgent communication from Dr. Evans back on New Singapore. The scientist's face appeared on a holographic display, his eyes wide with excitement. "Ward, I've made a breakthrough," Evans exclaimed. "I've found a way to enhance the Sanctuary's cloaking field using a combination of our stealth tech and Kobali bioluminescence. If we can implement it, the poachers won't be able to find this place again." Ward nodded, his mind racing. "Send the data. We'll make it happen." As the GWPU forces slowly gained the upper hand in space, Ward led a team to the Sanctuary's control center. Working with the resident technicians, they began implementing Evans' upgrades. Outside, the battle took a turn as the poachers, realizing they were outmatched, began to retreat. But Ward knew the fight was far from finished. "Don't let them escape," he ordered over the comms. "If even one ship gets away, they could lead others back here." GWPU ships gave chase, their non-lethal weapons disabling poacher vessels with remarkable efficiency. On the ground, the last of the Malorians were safely evacuated, their shimmering forms disappearing into the holds of GWPU transports. As the enhanced cloaking field activated, Sanctuary 7 seemed to fade from view, becoming invisible even to the naked eye. Ward allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction before turning his attention back to the broader operation. Reports flooded in from across the 3 sectors. Captain Reeves and his team had uncovered a massive underground facility filled with captured wildlife. Lieutenant Sarah Evans had successfully outmaneuvered a group of heavily armed poachers, capturing their leadership without a single casualty. As Operation Starlight Cascade entered its final phases, the scale of their success became clear. Dozens of major poaching hubs had been dismantled, hundreds of criminals apprehended, and countless endangered creatures rescued. But amid the victories, a shadow loomed. Ward's intelligence team had uncovered evidence of an even larger poaching operation being planned in a distant sector. Codenamed Eternal Night by the poachers, it threatened to undo everything the GWPU had accomplished. As the last of the poacher ships were disabled and secured, Ward received a priority communication from Colonel Hawthorne. "Ward, get back to New Singapore immediately," Hawthorne ordered, his voice grave. "We need to discuss this Eternal Night situation. Ambassador Blackwell will be joining us." As the Shadow Dancer set course for New Singapore, Ward gazed out at the stars, his mind already turning to the challenges ahead. The GWPU had won a significant victory today, but he knew that their greatest test was yet to come. Ward's mind raced as the Shadow Dancer approached New Singapore. The emergency meeting with Colonel Hawthorne and Ambassador Blackwell loomed, and the weight of the Eternal Night threat pressed heavily upon him. As he entered the briefing room, Ward found Hawthorne and Blackwell already deep in discussion. The colonel's face was grim, while the ambassador's usually calm demeanor showed signs of strain. "Ward, good to see you," Hawthorne said, gesturing for him to take a seat. "We've been analyzing the intel on Eternal Night. It's worse than we thought." Ambassador Blackwell nodded, her luminescent skin pulsing with a mix of concern and dedication. "The scale of this operation is unprecedented. We're looking at a massive coordinated effort across an entire sector." Ward leaned forward, studying the holographic display before them. "What's our plan of attack?" "We're initiating a rapid expansion," Hawthorne explained. "New recruitment drive, forward operating bases, the works. We need to extend our reach, and fast." Over the next few weeks, New Singapore transformed into a hub of frenetic activity. Ward found himself overseeing the integration of new recruits, seasoned law enforcement officers, wildlife specialists, and combat veterans from across human colonies. Dr. Evans, meanwhile, threw himself into developing new technology to meet the challenge. Ward watched as the scientist unveiled his latest creation, a fleet of long-range stealth ships. These beauties can cross vast distances quickly and undetected, Evans explained, his eyes gleaming with pride. And they're equipped with our most advanced sensors and non-lethal weapon systems. As preparations continued, Ward received troubling news. "Sir, we've lost contact with several undercover operatives in the target sector," a communications officer reported. Ward's teeth clenched. "They know we're coming. We need to move now." The assault on the Poachers' network began with a series of lightning strikes. Ward stood on the bridge of the Shadow Dancer, coordinating the attacks as GWPU ships emerged from stealth, catching the enemy off guard. "Target their supply depots and comm hubs," Ward ordered. "Cut off their logistics and coordination." Across the sector, chaos erupted as the Poachers found their operations suddenly crippled. But the GWPU's victory was short-lived. As ground teams deployed, they encountered fierce resistance. Lieutenant Sarah Evans's voice crackled over the comm. "We're pinned down on Station Omega. These aren't your average poachers. They're well-armed and well-trained." Ward dispatched reinforcements, his mind racing to adapt their strategy. The Poachers had clearly invested heavily in their defenses, but the GWPU's advanced non-lethal weaponry was slowly turning the tide. As the battle raged, Ward received an urgent transmission from Sarah. "Sir, you need to see this," she said, her voice tight with tension. The video feed showed a vast holding area filled with countless creatures. Among them were beings unlike anything Ward had ever seen, humanoid figures that seemed to glow from within. "A new sentient species," Sarah reported. "They're calling themselves the Lumini. Their bioluminescent properties are off the charts." Ward's heart raced. This discovery changed everything. "Get them out of there, Sarah, and gather all the intel you can." As news of the GWPU's action spread, an unexpected ally emerged. Local populations, long oppressed by the Poachers, began offering assistance. Their knowledge proved invaluable, allowing the GWPU to target key locations with surgical precision. The operation reached its climax as Ward led an elite team to infiltrate the Poachers' central command. Hidden within a dense asteroid field, the heavily fortified space station loomed before them. "Stick to the plan," Ward instructed as their captured Poacher vessel approached the station. "We're rival Syndicate members here to discuss a deal." Heart pounding, Ward stepped onto the station. Every instinct screamed danger as they moved through the corridors, but their disguises held. They worked quickly, sabotaging systems and downloading critical data. As alarms began to blare, Ward gave the signal. "Time to go. Trigger the self-destruct and let's move." They raced back to their ship as the station began to tear itself apart. The destruction of the command center sent shockwaves through the Poacher network, leaving them vulnerable to the GWPU's final push. In the aftermath, as Ward sifted through the recovered data, a chill ran down his spine. The conspiracy before them was vast, reaching into the highest levels of corporate and political power across multiple sectors. As he prepared to brief Hawthorne and Blackwell, Ward knew that the GWPU stood at a crossroads. Their mandate was expanding, their challenges growing. The battle against Eternal Night was won, but a greater war loomed on the horizon. Ward took a deep breath, steeling himself for the briefing ahead. The data they'd uncovered painted a picture of corruption and exploitation on a scale that dwarfed even their most pessimistic estimates. As he entered the command center, he found Colonel Hawthorne and Ambassador Blackwell already poring over holographic displays filled with damning evidence. "Gentlemen," Ward said, his voice cutting through the tense atmosphere, "I believe we're looking at the tip of a very large iceberg." Hawthorne nodded grimly. "You're right, Ward. This conspiracy reaches further than we ever imagined. Corporate executives, high-ranking politicians, even members of the Galactic Council itself. Ambassador Blackwell's bioluminescent skin pulsed with a mix of anger and persistence. We can't let this continue. The damage to countless species, entire ecosystems. It's incalculable. Ward stepped forward, his eyes scanning the sea of data before them. Then we take them all down, every last one of them. Hawthorne's lips curved into a tight smile. I was hoping you'd say that. We're initiating Operation Daybreak, effective immediately. Over the next few hours, the trio hammered out the details of their ambitious plan. It would be a multi-pronged assault on the very foundations of the poaching network, striking at its heart in the halls of power across multiple sectors. As dawn broke over New Singapore, GWPU teams led by Lieutenant Sarah Evans moved into position. Their ships, cloaked in cutting-edge stealth technology, slipped past corporate defense grids and political security cordons with ease. Ward watched from the Shadow Dancer's bridge as the first wave of raids began. On dozens of worlds, GWPU operatives breached corporate headquarters and government offices simultaneously. Their non-lethal weapons, refined through years of field operations, made short work of security forces. Team Alpha reporting in. Sarah's voice crackled over the comm. We've secured the main server room at NovaCorp's headquarters. Downloading now. Similar reports flooded in from across the sector. As the data poured in, analysts on New Singapore worked feverishly to piece together the full extent of the conspiracy. Meanwhile, Ambassador Blackwell launched into action on the diplomatic front. Using his unparalleled skills in interspecies communication, he began rallying support among key members of the Galactic Council. Ward joined Blackwell for a crucial meeting with the Zephyrian delegation. The ethereal beings listened intently as Blackwell presented the evidence they'd gathered. This goes beyond simple poaching, Blackwell explained, his skin pulsing with urgency. It's a systematic exploitation of vulnerable species across the galaxy. We need your support to bring it to an end. The lead Zephyrian representative, a shimmering figure of pure energy, pulsed with a mix of emotions. This evidence is disturbing. You have our full support, Ambassador. The Zephyrian Collective stands with the GWPU. As diplomatic victories mounted, Dr. Marcus Evans made a breakthrough that would change the course of the operation. Ward rushed to the research lab, finding the scientists surrounded by holographic displays of cellular structures. "Ward, you won't believe this," Evans exclaimed, his eyes wide with excitement. "I've been studying the Lumini's bioluminescent properties, and I've discovered something extraordinary." The scientists launched into a rapid-fire explanation, pointing out key details in the swirling display of molecules and cells. Ward listened intently, his mind racing as he grasped the implications. "So, you're saying we can synthesize an alternative to the poached materials?" Ward asked, his voice filled with a mixture of hope and disbelief. Evans nodded vigorously. "Exactly. This could eliminate the economic incentive behind the entire poaching industry." As Ward relayed this information to Hawthorne and Blackwell, a new phase of Operation Daybreak took shape. They would not only dismantle the existing poaching network, but also cut off its future at the source. However, their efforts did not go unnoticed. As the GWPU closed in on key figures in the conspiracy, they received alarming intelligence. A hidden research facility, deep in corporate-controlled space, held the remaining captive Lumini. Ward knew they had to act fast. He assembled an elite team, preparing for a high-risk extraction mission. As the Shadow Dancer and its escort ship slipped into enemy territory, Ward felt the familiar surge of adrenaline. "All ships maintain stealth protocols," he ordered as they approached the facility. "We go in fast and quiet. Our priority is the Lumini prisoners and any research data we can secure." The ensuing battle was swift and brutal. Corporate security forces, caught off guard by the GWPU's advanced technology, fell quickly to precision strikes and non-lethal takedowns. Ward led the charge into the central laboratory, his team moving with practiced efficiency. They found the Lumini prisoners held in stasis pods, their bioluminescent forms pulsing weakly. "Get them out of there," Ward commanded, his voice tight with controlled fury. "And download everything from their research terminals. Dr. Evans will want to see all of it." As they secured the last of the prisoners, alarms blared throughout the facility. Ward's team fought their way back to the extraction point, corporate reinforcements hot on their heels. The Shadow Dancer's engines roared to life as the last of the rescue team boarded, Lumini prisoners safely in tow. As they broke atmosphere, surrounded by a swarm of corporate fighters, Ward knew that Operation Daybreak had just entered its most dangerous phase. The conspiracy's leadership, now fully aware of the threat they faced, would stop at nothing to maintain their power. As the Shadow Dancer raced back to New Singapore, Ward could only hope that the GWPU was prepared for the storm that was about to break.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.